It's time for another volume of Museum of Twitter episodes. This is 76 to 100. As always, check the description for time codes. On May 22nd, 2012, Dril tweeted, "If the zoo bans me for hollering at the animals, I will face God and walk backwards into hell." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Dril week is continuing on, and I know some people have said that if this one was not the finale, they would riot, and I apologize. You might just have to face God and walk backwards into hell. And that's why you're here, isn't it? That phrase, face God and walk backwards into hell, it's one of the most cliche things to observe, but it really feels like it's a part of classic literature and not a Twitter shitpost. As Reagan Kelly says here, "For almost 10 years I've marveled at the spiteful poetic power of the phrase, 'I will face God and walk backwards into hell,' and only occasionally do I remember that it's from a Dril tweet about hollering at zoo animals." Because that's the thing too, it's not just from a Dril tweet, it's from a tweet about hollering at zoo animals. What the hell does it mean to holler at zoo animals? But obviously this phrase has a hold over people, it has a hold over me, and I really am trying to understand what it is, and this great Tumblr post, and I don't say that often about Tumblr posts, from Zero Farad, I think breaks it down perfectly. Since I'm going to read it verbatim, if you're on Tumblr, please find this post and like it and share it and all the things you do on Tumblr. So the post says, "As with much of poetic literary language, every reader can have a different take. Mine is like this. To face God and walk backwards into hell is not to turn from God and reject his authority, but to acknowledge his rules and do the opposite anyway. To be specifically contrary in the full awareness that it hurts yourself at least as much as him. In an older idiom, to cut off your nose to spite your face. As a threat then, it says, this is my line. If you cross it, I will stop at nothing. I will become an evil-maximizing Iago and reject all good. Do not push me there." I think this analysis is so good and so spot on, which makes it doubly funny that he's talking about hollering at zoo animals. I know I'm a broken record saying only Dril could think of this, but only Dril could think about a guy who's so mad about getting banned from the zoo that he is willing to have eternal damnation just so he can spit in God's face about it. And because it captures that so perfectly, "I will face God and walk backwards into hell" has become a phrase to signal defiance. When Vampire Truther is drinking an energy drink at 10 p.m. just for the taste, she is saying, "I will face God and walk backwards into hell." In order to demonstrate just how much he doesn't want Trae Young on his team, Patrick Fenelon tweets, "I would face God and walk backwards into hell before having Trae Young on my team." And as a Knicks fan, you're damn right. People have put the quote over photos of people screaming, like Travis Kelce yelling at Andy Reid. Possibly my favorite use of this Dril quote is this tweet from Camouflage, which reads, "If the Garden of Eden bans me for hollering at the humans, I will face God and walk backwards into hell. -- Paradise Lost by John Drilton." Now, I've never actually read Paradise Lost, but that's what happens, right? The place that "I will face God and walk backwards into hell" has on Twitter is among the tweets that have come up with phrases that sound like they come from literature and not a tweet. I'm not going to go over a lot of the examples because I still have not covered them, but what I have covered is "When God sings with his creations, will a turtle not be part of the choir?" The fact that this phrase came from a Dril tweet and not something important is often compared to the fact that the quote, "Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?" comes from Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams. It just goes to show that you can find beauty anywhere. I wish there was a quote about how there were cathedrals for all with eyes to see. I'm working on it. There are 2 more episodes of Dril Week, and also, as I mentioned at the end of last episode, if I get to 1 million likes by the end of Dril Week, and I could be there now, I'm recording these pretty far ahead of time, if I get to 1 million likes before the end of Dril Week, there will be an 8th day to Dril Week. Because the thing is, I don't think Dril respects calendars. On May 9th, 2014, Dril tweeted, "Drunk driving may kill a lot of people, but it also helps a lot of people get to work on time. So it's impossible to say if it's bad or not." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Normally this would be a sports tweet Saturday, but I could not find a sports-related tweet from Dril, so because it's Dril Week, we're just doing another Dril tweet. Sorry sports fans, I'll make it up to you. And this one is an important entry in the Dril canon because it sums up the perfect type of dumb argument you see online, you see in real life, you see everywhere. And honestly, I think I'm being too kind calling it a dumb argument, because I feel like most people who make this argument are just being disingenuous. Obviously, drunk driving is an extreme example, which is why Dril is using it in this exaggerated joke tweet, but if you look at basically any other traffic law, people will make this exact argument. Like this example I pull from 2022. Apparently, the city of Ann Arbor was considering banning right on red turns as a way to save pedestrian lives, but people who were against it said that it was bad because it would cause some people to be later to work. To put it simply, this disingenuous argument is basically saying that if there's one positive benefit to something, even if there are a million negative consequences that are way worse than that one positive benefit has a veto power. It is an argument used by selfish people to explain why they don't want to do a good thing. And I'm sure it happens happens elsewhere, but it pops up in American politics so often. Think about all the people in 2020 who said with a straight face, wearing a mask in public may help save lives, but it makes me uncomfortable for 15 minutes, so it's impossible to say if it's good or not. And yes, drunk driving is an exaggeration, but this is really the logical extension of a lot of the individualistic arguments people make. Like, this guy here made the argument with a straight face that the Internet Explorer team working basically 24-hour shifts, which caused broken families and divorces, was worth it because they coded well. Who knows? I don't know what it is about Twitter that makes people log on and basically say, I'm a sociopath. I think the destruction of other people's lives is worth it to get my goals met. Although honestly, that might just be because Twitter has a lot of tech people on it. Now, this tweet obviously comes up whenever actual drunk driving happens, and in honor of Sports Tweet Saturday, I have two sports-related things. Someone brought it up talking about UGA football, because anyone who follows college football knows that if there's anything a University of Georgia player can't do, it's drive responsibly. And a lot of people brought it up during this college football offseason when Oklahoma State head coach and OANN superfan Mike Gundy defended one of his assistant coaches who got a DUI by basically saying, I mean, I looked at his blood alcohol level and that's only like 4 beers, and haven't we all gotten in a car like that? And then there was this controversy earlier this year, which was so stupid, when comedian Jake Flores basically tried to make the argument that everyone has a DUI. I shouldn't say he basically tries to make that argument, because that is literally the first line of what he said. It was one of those things where he was basically making this argument to try to justify why he had a DUI, and his argument was like, yeah, there's no public transportation near bars in most areas, and it's like, yes, that is true, but there's a long walk between that and it's okay to drive drunk. Like, replace the word work with home, and he was basically saying what the drill tweet said. And the general construction of this drill tweet, ending in so it's impossible to say if it's bad or not, is used on a lot of different subjects. I really like this one from Noam Chompers, which reads, tribalism leads to dehumanization and oppression of the out-group, but it also fosters warm feelings among the in-group, so it's impossible to say if it's bad or not. I like it because it makes clear if you extend the metaphor of drill tweet further, you basically make the argument that nothing is bad. Because if one person benefiting from something makes you have to throw up your hands and say it's impossible to tell if it's bad or not, then basically nothing is bad. Of course, the tweet construction is used for a lot less serious things, like BioShock Infinite may have cringe writing, but it also has a boy that dances with a baguette, so it's impossible to say if it's bad or not. There are a lot of other examples, but frankly, a lot of them open up political cans of worms that I really don't feel like dissecting right now. Like, yeah, I can show you the one that applies to a quote that J.D. Vance had about housing and immigration in the Midwest, but do we really want to break that down right now? What I will say is, and I don't want to be preachy or whatever, but I'm sure that there are people who are watching this who are like in high school or college. If anyone tries to tell you that they're a good drunk driver, they're full of it, and you shouldn't get in their car. I know that that's eye-roll-worthy basic advice, but if just one person heeds that advice and doesn't get into a car, I'll sleep easy. There was supposed to be only one more day of Drill Week, but because I got to 1 million likes, Drill Week is 8 days. So, there are 2 more drill tweets coming your way. Stay tuned. On June 1st, 2014, Drill tweeted, "The wise man bowed his head solemnly and spoke. There's actually zero difference between good and bad things. You imbecile. You fucking moron." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. This was supposed to be the final day of Drill Week, but because I got more than 1 million likes, it's now going to go on until tomorrow. But I did intend this to be the final tweet of Drill Week because I think that this is the most useful tweet that Drill has ever put out. Drill summed up a good 50% of bad discourse with just this tweet. It's why Michael Schur, the creator of Parks and Rec, The Good Place, and other shows, once called it the only good tweet. Because if there is a defining problem with the discourse of our time, I honestly think it might be that there are a lot of people who think that they are smarter and wiser than anyone else because they think that everything is value neutral, that there is no such thing as good and bad, that good and bad are for the emotional people of the world and not for the cold, calculating people who make real decisions. These are the type of people who look at a protest for racial equality and a protest and eventual riot to overturn a democratic election and say, these are basically the same to me. And the reason they do this is because they've convinced themselves that good and bad don't matter, because obviously racial equality is good, and obviously overturning an election is bad, but if you've convinced yourself that good and bad are childish terms, and sober analysis only comes from looking at things in a value-neutral sense, then maybe, yeah, you'll throw up your hands and say that they're basically the same. As the great comedian Josh Gondelman once tweeted, "It's amazing how many columnists get paid 6 figures to write an unironic 800-word version of this tweet a few times a year." I think why I find the reasoning of the wise man in Drill's tweet and all the people who emulate him so annoying and lazy is because I think it's really imperative for us to have discussions about what is good and bad. But when you act like good and bad are not relevant at all, you are sidestepping the important moral questions of our day. Analyzing things from a completely dispassionate 500-foot view doesn't help anyone, because that's not the perspective anyone in real life actually has on issues. I don't expect us to all agree on what's good and bad, but I think that having a perspective on what's good and bad is part of being a human, and when you act like you don't have a perspective on what's good and bad on a particular issue, you are lying, and it makes me really curious to wonder why you're lying. And if I can go back to the hypothetical columnist I'm talking about who compared racial equality protests with the January 6th riots, The reason I think that that person is lying is because they don't actually think racial equality is that important, they don't think it's something worth protesting, but they know that they can't say that out loud, so they just have to criticize the general aesthetics and act like they don't have an opinion on it at all. You can see it here, where this guy Ben Cooper basically compares Matt Walsh and Dylan Mulvaney by saying that they are both grifters trying to make money out of telling women how to behave like proper women based on sexist stereotypes. Now, could you technically make the argument that Matt Walsh and Dylan Mulvaney both tell women how to behave like proper women? I guess you could. I don't know if I would use the word proper, but fine. But what Matt Walsh does is extremely misogynistic and basically wants women to return to traditional gender roles, and Dylan Mulvaney is mostly talking about embracing femininity as a trans woman. And so you can see how Ben is being the wise man in the drill tweet here. He is acting like there is zero difference between something good, someone celebrating being a trans woman, and something bad, wanting to enforce strict, antiquated gender roles. And if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, it's obvious why he's doing this. It's because he does not agree with me when I say that celebrating being a trans woman is a good thing, and so he wants to criticize that, but knows he can't say that directly, so he has to come up with a reverse way of saying that it's actually bad and she's actually like Matt Walsh, etc., etc. Or you can look at when Jamel Bowie invoked this drill tweet. There was a column that this Abe Greenwald guy wrote, basically saying that the left also engages in segregation. Now, the segregation in question was things like black student clubs and Latino student clubs, things like that. And clearly this Abe Greenwald guy wants to criticize the existence of clubs for people of a certain race, but he knows that that wouldn't be popular to do, so he has to act like there's a moral equivalence between that, which is something that is good, or even neutral we can say, and something bad, segregation. It's just such a chicken shit way to talk about anything. And I think what this drill tweet gets most correct is the end. The "you imbecile, you fucking moron." Because the people who make these types of arguments love to be so smug, acting like you're a 12-year-old because you dare think that there are good and bad things in the world. They always have the attitude of like, the adults don't engage in whether something's morally right or wrong. And I think that that is a position that everyone should be deeply suspicious of. Once again, I don't expect, nor do I think we should all agree in every single way on what is good and bad. But when someone acts like that's a question that is not even worth asking, you have to assume that they're okay with some pretty bad things, but don't want to admit it. Because no one actually goes through the world that way. If you punch someone in the face because they tried to steal your wallet, that is obviously not the same thing if you punch someone in the face because you don't like what race they are. You'd be an idiot if you saw both those things and then wrote a column saying, "Face punching's on the rise, both among victims of crime and racists. We really need to put an end to it." Like I said, I think this tweet is so relevant because people refuse to stop acting like the wise man in it. There obviously is a difference between good and bad things. For example, it is good when people ask, "Hey Jake, just curious, do you plan on doing this tweet?" And it is bad when people say, "Day 5 of asking for this tweet." Sorry, that's a personal issue, but in the comments, talk to me like I'm a human being, please. The bonus day of Drill Week is tomorrow, so make sure you follow, make sure you look at all the other tweets in Drill Week. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for getting me to 1 million likes, so there will be a bonus episode of Drill Week. So tune in then, and tune into the tweets I cover after that. On July 26, 2016, Drill tweeted, "So long, suckers. I rev up my motorcycle and create a huge cloud of smoke. When the cloud dissipates, I'm lying completely dead on the pavement." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It is the bonus 8th day of Drill Week, and so I had to cover a tweet that a lot of people requested in my comments during Drill Week. And it's not hard to see why. It's just an incredibly funny image. Comedy has changed a lot over the years, but I think a thing that's always been funny is someone pompously saying, "So long, suckers," and then just wiping out. And because it's drill, there are little touches that just make it better, like how motorcycle is misspelled, how there's a huge cloud of smoke, how he's not just wiped out, he's dead. And so as many of you are aware, this tweet is used to describe any time someone sort of makes a pompous show of something and then completely falls on their face. I did find this example funny, where someone uses the screenshot of Joe Biden tweeting that he's accepting the CNN debate, and he's very confident in it. He says anytime, any place, and obviously we know how that went. When the smoke cleared, he was politically dead on the pavement. Similarly, someone did the same thing when Ron DeSantis dropped out of the presidential race, because as you all can remember, him and the political press made a gigantic deal about his campaign. He was the new wonder kid in the GOP. He was going to win everything. And then when the smoke cleared, he was politically dead on the pavement. People have compared so many things to this tweet, like Drake dropping the Heart Part 6 during his beef with Kendrick. Last year, people compared the submersible that imploded near the Titanic to this drill tweet, and I think that that's actually a perfect example of what the drill tweet is getting at, because it's not just that it imploded way under the sea and people were paying attention to it, etc., etc. It's that the guy who made it could not stop bragging about how smart he was for all the things he was doing, about how he was going to prove everyone in the submersible community wrong. Because seeing someone wipe out on a motorcycle in itself is not that funny. I mean, it can be funny if it happens in a comedic way, but just a regular motorcycle crash is not going to make you guffaw. But someone being pompous beforehand and then wiping out, that becomes funny. People compare scenes in movies and television when this happens to this tweet, like when Sean William Scott as Country Mac on It's Always Sunny rode away on his motorcycle looking cool but then fell over almost immediately. But my favorite example of this drill tweet being applied is from an anecdote about Elon Musk and Peter Thiel early on in PayPal. I'm sure many people have made the comparison, but this tweet from Anzake is where I found it. I'm just going to read this in full. Perhaps the most revealing moment in the PayPal saga happened at its outset. In March 2000, as the merger was underway, Musk was driving his new McLaren with Thiel in the passenger seat. The two were on Sand Hill Road, an artery that cuts through Silicon Valley. Thiel asked Musk, "So what can this do?" Musk replied, "Watch this," then floored the gas pedal, hit an embankment, and sent the car airborne and spinning before it slammed back onto the pavement, blowing out its suspension and its windows. "This isn't insured," Musk told Thiel. In addition to just being a funny story about a buffoon, it really does check all of the boxes of the drill tweet. The "watch this" is the "so long suckers," the "going airborne" is the "cloud of smoke," and the "this isn't insured" is the "dead on the pavement." I think a good lesson to take from this tweet is that you can be the guy who's pompous and says "so long suckers," or you can be the guy who ends up dead on the pavement, but you really don't want to be both. Because if you say "so long suckers" and pull whatever you're trying to do off, you're a really cool guy, and if you don't see anything and end up dead on the pavement, people will feel sorry for you. But if you do both, people will just laugh at you. And at the end of the day, isn't that what we're all trying to avoid? I want to thank all of you for making Drill Week such a massive success. It's been so much fun to talk about these drill tweets, and I do plan on doing other fun stuff like this in the future, so just stay tuned. And as I always used to say before Drill Week, where I changed up the outro, make sure you follow for a new tweet every day and check the playlist for every previous entry. On December 31st, 2012, Tyler the Creator tweeted, "Ha ha 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 ha, how the f*** is cyberbullying real? Ha 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 ha. Dude, just walk away from the screen. Like, dude, close your eyes. Haha." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. With Drill Week over, I wanted to get to one of the tweets that has been most requested in my comments for the past few months. And to tell you the truth, I've been avoiding doing this tweet for two reasons. One, the last time I did a tweet where I replaced the N-word with another word, people were really angry and weird in the comments, which I don't really understand, because did they really expect me to get onto Al Gore's internet and just use a racial epithet willy-nilly? And two, I kind of hate this tweet. I don't really like it. I understand why other people find it funny, but it's just really hard for me to laugh at this tweet because of the reality of what cyberbullying actually is in the world. I'm sorry, I'm a softie. And I have no problem not liking a tweet I'm talking about, but usually when I don't like a tweet that I'm talking about, the point is that the tweet is bad. But I know that the people who are requesting this tweet want me to do it because they think it's funny. And so I feel kind of bad that someone is tuning in expecting me to talk about how funny this tweet is and how good of an impact it has had. And I can't do any of those things because I'd be lying to you if I said that I thought this tweet was funny. Like, yes, in theory, cyberbullying just happens through your screen. So you could walk away and shut your eyes and not get cyberbullied anymore. But, like, that's like saying that you shouldn't go to the lunchroom because the bully is there, and if you want to avoid getting bullied, just don't ever be in the same room as your bully. And in 2012 it was a little more understandable, but now, with how much of life goes on online, are you really expecting a 12-year-old to do nothing online at all just because people are bullying them there? And I'm aware that I'm taking this more seriously than Tyler meant it, but that's what I do on the show. I take drill tweets very seriously, so I had to take this tweet very seriously. And I'm sure some people are going to be like, "Oh, Jake, you got bullied a lot, that's why you're so sensitive." And the thing is, I really wasn't bullied that much, which is kind of crazy given my entire personality. I've really been this way my whole life, and for some reason I really didn't get bullied. But I know how unhelpful it is to give advice like this. And I'm not so much talking about Tyler here, because this was just a tweet he fired off randomly, but people who take this advice seriously, who use this meme as a way of shutting down discussions about cyberbullying. Do you really think that a kid who is crying himself to sleep because he's getting cyberbullied on multiple sites, making his life miserable, do you really think that he's never considered just not going on the internet? Do you really think that? And Tyler followed up this original cyberbullying tweet with two other tweets that night. One of them is saying, instead of taking up for these cyberbullying victims, maybe you should tell them to stand up for themselves and be themselves and shit like that. Which is slightly more helpful, but once again, do you really think the kids have never thought about that? He also tweeted, "But I do not like bullying in real life. That shit is not tight. I heard some kid got beat up all the time and said, f it. So sad." And I can see how someone who has not experienced cyberbullying would be like, getting beat up, that's real bullying. Cyberbullying is not real bullying. And yes, but clearly it is given the way it affects people. I just refuse to have such a low opinion of children and teens. I think that the reason why cyberbullying affects them so badly is because they've never considered logging off. For better and worse, and mostly worse, we've really engineered a society where children mostly interact online. So you're telling kids that their choices are either get bullied or basically have no connection with their peers at all. And that's awful to me. I'm sorry. I really wish that I could lie to you and pretend that I find this tweet really funny. And if you hate this episode and you don't want to watch the next one, that's absolutely fine. But I want you to know that that when I do this series, I'm telling you my honest opinion on all of these tweets, and I hope that that's more valuable than me making up an opinion to try to appeal to you as viewers. I do think that part of the reason why this tweet has such a cultural cachet is because, as this tweet points out, there's basically no impact from school anti-bullying seminars. And to be clear, I don't want to make it seem like kids who are getting bullied wouldn't have some benefit from logging off. But I have a 15-year-old cousin, and if she were to text me saying that she was getting cyberbullied, my advice would be more nuanced than just turn off your phone. But I do very much agree with this pro-social gang stalker tweet. I don't think Tyler the Creator's famous cyberbullying tweet is good advice for most people realistically, but it does apply for Chrissy Teigen and whoever she is beefing with at any moment. Turn off your phone and go chill in your jacuzzi or whatever. And I think that's kind of where the disconnect is. I think that people like Tyler are imagining cyberbullying like a Twitter fight, but that's not really what it is. Cyberbullying can be very vicious. I don't want to use any examples because I don't want to show any of that stuff on here, but if you look into some of the cyberbullying that caused kids to lose their lives, you would understand how horrible it can be. And it's why I kind of agree with this Lil Sam Squinch tweet about the Tyler tweet. The dudes who still RT the Tyler the Creator how you get cyberbullied tweet are in so much fucking pain. That's not to say that everyone who finds it funny falls into this, but it feels like this tweet still being retweeted and shared a lot is projection. I just feel like the type of person who shares the Tyler tweet every time the subject of cyberbullying comes up is the type of person who has been actually hurt by something that was said online, something that was done online, but they don't really want to admit it to themselves, so they're like, yeah, that didn't really hurt. I could just log off at any time. And yes, this is rich coming from someone with a fine arts degree who could barely bench the bar in high school, but I think it's okay to have your feelings hurt and to admit it. And that it's really awful to have your feelings hurt, and sometimes it doesn't feel as simple as just closing your eyes. Sorry again that this one wasn't very funny, but if you think about it, the Venn diagram of people who would make a TikTok series about tweets and people who think that bullying can be funny, that's really just two circles, so I really don't know what you expected from me. Follow me for a new tweet every day and check the playlist for every previous entry. On January 3rd, 2017, Coldwater Chris tweeted, I used to think wrestlers on WWE sang their own theme songs. You can't tell me Triple H song don't sound like him yelling on the track. Big Show was for show in the booth talking about, well... This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. First and foremost, I want to apologize for the way I butchered that second tweet. There's just no way in my general monotone delivery to say the words Tombow or for show without sounding like an absolute idiot. But I had to do this tweet because I think it's a seminal tweet in the history of wrestling Twitter. I can say that because I am not a wrestling fan at all, and I've seen it many times. The thing that Coldwater Chris is saying here is that he thought that Triple H, the wrestler, sang his theme song, The Game. Let's take a listen. Time to play the game! I suppose I could imagine that being him, and if you're not a wrestling fan and you recognize that song, it's from this cover from Mark Anderson 8 on TikTok. Time to play the game! Now, as you can see from Mark's caption, the song The Game is actually by Motorhead, so it was not sung by Triple H. But what about the Big Show's theme song? Let's see if it sounds like he sang it. Well, it's a big show. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I can imagine him looking like he does in this photo, singing that song in the booth. But as I mentioned before, I'm not really a wrestling fan. As you can certainly guess by my personality, I was that really annoying kid on the playground whenever everyone else was talking about wrestling. I would say, don't you know that that's fake? And I understand now that that was a big mistake and I was being annoying, but I can't change that that's who I was, so I never really got into it. But I want to bring in an expert because I know that there are a lot of wrestling fans watching. So I reached out to my friend Cameron Hawkins. You might know him at Seahawk. He's a wrestling journalist, and I want him to break down the history of theme songs and wrestling and whether or not he thinks this tweet is accurate. So Cam, I obviously am not a huge wrestling fan. I know some stuff just because when you're on Twitter and you follow people who are involved in wrestling, you glean some stuff. But what is the history of theme songs for people in WWE? How integral is it to that whole part?
Oh man, it's been... As far as I can remember, like they've had super iconic theme songs. Jim Johnson is like spearheaded so many of the popular ones that we know. But especially, we talking like 80s, 90s. Mm-hmm. That's when like the theme song was really synonymous with the talent. And that's why so many of those songs are still played today. Like it's still a very big deal. You know, glass breaks, you still think of Stone Cold, like mm-hmm. If the car comes to a screeching halt, it's like a Razor Ramon or it's a Mick Foley. And then, you hear these really, really iconic, like first few beats. It's stuff that never goes away. The NWO music, like it never dies. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So this tweet obviously talks about two songs really. One of them is Triple H's theme song, which I believe is The Game by Motorhead. Mm-hmm. And then the Big Show's theme song. Now, the joke in this tweet is that this person thought that, not even joke, they just thought that everyone's sung their own theme songs. Now, I think I know the answer to this question, but why do you think that this person might think that?
Well, because white people sound the same. But no, in all seriousness, it's because the guy wails at the beginning, and the voices aren't too different on those first few notes. Like, it does kind of sound like Paul White at the beginning. So
Paul White, of course, being the Big Show. Just want to clarify.
If you're not like country music guy or listening to a bunch of artists at the time, like, why wouldn't it be him, right? Like, yeah, it's all Shawn Michaels' fault for really singing his own theme song. Okay. And so from that point on, people thought, well, like, they're not hiring like super famous like artists, so maybe it's him.
That's what I was going to ask, because I know that John Cena does his own theme song, so I figure that that's what it was. Now, what about, because Triple H is also mentioned, I don't hear that at all, because I guess maybe just because I'm a white guy and I know what Motorhead sounds like.
Yeah. But... It's funny. You know, there was a time when Triple H was literally cutting his beard into like the kind of mutton chops turn, just like Lemmy. Like it wasn't just Motorhead did his song, like he was tight with those guys. You know what I mean? So again, I can see why people would think that. And we also come from a time when we thought wrestlers were like so multifaceted, like they should be in all the movies and on TV. Like when you're that age, they're everything to you. So yeah.
And is there a wrestler who like didn't do their own theme song that you wish did their own theme song?
Who? Let's see. I mean, it would have been cool if Chris Jericho did his theme, like way back, like his Y2J theme. That would have been cool. That's probably the one. Like, you know, it's funny. I knew but didn't know. Like, Lil' Kim sings Trish Stratus's theme song. Like, she raps her theme song, and it's always been like a great one. And I didn't put it together till like way down the line. But yeah, there are a few like that. I mean, like R-Truth does his. Everybody's theme song, like the Usos technically do theirs.
So it's a tradition that still is going on. Like, it's not, people haven't gotten too cool to do their own theme songs. Yeah,
it hasn't died. But it's more now like I do the ad libs on my theme song.
Right.
It's way more of that. Yeah.
Now, I also think, and this is just about the tweet, I think that 90% of the reason the tweet is funny is because of the face that the Big Show is making.
Because he's in mid well. Like, it's perfect. That's a perfect catch. It really is.
It's honestly, it's the one, and then the photo of Shaq with the hot chip that looks like he's singing. They're really in the same, come from the same cloth.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, Shaq is so like synonymous with that. It's typically like him or this little kid. Whenever somebody's doing like a falsetto or an ooh sound, like Shaq is put on there. But no, seriously, like there's a croon to what Shaq does. Absolutely.
Yes. And Cam, where can people? I know you had a new job and writing new wrestling stuff. Where can people follow you?
Yeah. Starting mid-October, you'll find me at Yahoo Sports Uncrowned. I'm talking wrestling over there. The Ringer, Complex. Those are like the big three right now. And then you'll see me kind of peppered and littered around. So yeah.
Once again, I want to thank Cam for coming on. If you're a wrestling fan, he really is an indispensable follow. And before I go, I want to include some tweets of people talking about this tweet. It was kind of hard to find since his original tweet was deleted a while ago, so I had to look up the Big Show singing, etc., etc. But I got some things like, every time I see the Big Show now, I just think of the tweet of him in the studio singing his own theme song, or why the world keep lying to us about the Big Show not singing his own theme song. We know his big ass was yelling, well, and just in bed up thinking about how the Big Show wasn't the one singing his own theme song, LMAO. And I will say, I feel like if the Big Show theme song started any other way, this tweet would not be as funny, but there's just something so great about no music, and then, well, to imagine a gigantic 7-foot 500-pound guy singing. And before you go, a really important announcement. Technically, I announced this on Monday, but this is the first episode I'm recording after it's official. I'm starting a subscription program on TikTok, so what you can do is subscribe, and you will get one episode a week, which is the Museum of Not Twitter, where I will go over something that did not originate on Twitter, something from Tumblr, something from Reddit, something else that I want to talk about that you guys are requesting that I can't cover on this series because it didn't come from Twitter. And also, I'm having a Discord where people can suggest tweets, and once a week, I will pick 4 of the tweets that are suggested. You can vote on them, and then that'll be the tweet I cover on Subscriber Sunday. So please consider subscribing. It's just $2.99. I'm hoping to have a really good time with it, and if there's any other suggestions of things you'd like me to do with the subscription, I'm all ears. I really just want to keep interacting with y'all. I really love creating content for this community, and so yeah, please join up if you're interested, and let me know if you have any questions. On July 18, 2020, Just the Zoo of Us tweeted, "What is the most overrated animal?" Michael Eisen quoted and said, "See Elegans. They wiggle forward, they wiggle backwards, and occasionally they themselves. That's it. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. As I've said before, a very important goal on this show is to cover important tweets from every sector of Twitter, especially ones that I am not a part of. And so please do not turn this off if you have never heard of this tweet. I swear it gets so interesting. Because I got a DM a few weeks ago from someone saying that they inadvertently started a firestorm on biology Twitter. And I'm like, surely there couldn't have been a firestorm on biology Twitter. And little did I know, this whole saga, called Wormgate, was even written up in the Daily Beast. To sum up what happened before I go to my guest where we talk about it at length, people in the worm community, or worm-adjacent community, took this joke as similar to sexism, racism, and other actual bad things. And the comparisons got ridiculous. So the person who reached out to me and my guest today is Ellen Weatherford, who is a wildlife enthusiast and the co-host of the Just the Zoo of Us podcast, the account that asked the original question. So here's my interview with Ellen where we talk about this whole saga. And so you start out with a completely innocuous tweet. You just asked, what is the most overhyped animal? Talk a little about your background. What made you want to ask that?
Okay, so at the time, I still do, but at the time I had a podcast, that I was making a lot of Twitter engagement. Twitter was big for engagement at the time. Twitter, I would say, at the time when this happened, was my biggest platform. That was a platform I was the most active on, got the most engagement on. And let's be real, a lot of it was engagement bait. I'll be honest about that. It's a lot of engagement bait. You tweet out a question that a lot of people are going to answer, right? And so I've been tweeting out a lot of very open-ended questions, like, tell me about, a cool animal you saw one time. Like, have you ever traveled somewhere to see an animal? Stuff like that. And so the day before, I had posted a tweet saying, what is the most underhyped animal? Asking people to talk about, maybe an animal that's really obscure and not a lot of people know about. So you get a lot of okapis and, like vultures and stuff.
I feel like the okapi, though, is that's like the baseline underrated animal. Like, yeah, it's like a normal person.
It's a little off the path.
Yeah, to a normal person, it's... But I feel like I imagine the zoology community, it's like, okay, yeah, we heard that okapis are underrated.
Right, we know about them.
I don't know if you can say that something that's on the Disney safari is underrated, but okay, fine.
So, there's a lot of people like that. Yeah. And then some people were like, ooh, next you should ask which ones are overrated. And I was like, okay, sure, go. Like, bet. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so my intention is for us to kind of dunk on like what's called the charismatic megafauna, right? Like animals that if you ask a kid what their favorite animal is, they're probably going to say like a lion or an elephant or something like that, right? So I'm thinking we're going to dunk on especially dolphins among like people that are really into animals. It's very fun to hate on dolphins. Because they're huge jerks. So that's kind of where I was at with this. Yeah. That tweet got like a lot of attention at the time. The Twitter app was absolutely broken. And so anytime I had a tweet get like mildly successful, I would have to mute it because it would crash my phone. Like the notification system was a disaster. So I muted the tweet and it forgot about it, honestly, for like 3 days. Like did not continue to monitor it. I just muted it. I was like, okay, neat. I'm going to move on. And then unbeknownst to me, it developed a life of its own after me.
Yes. So another person in the zoology Twitter community, Michael Eisen, says, see Elegans, they wriggle forward, they wiggle backwards, and occasionally they fuck themselves. That's it. Now tell me a little bit about C. elegans.
So this is a nematode, which is a type of little tiny itty bitty microscopic worm. And the important thing about this worm is that it is very, very commonly used as what's called a model organism. I didn't know any of this before this tweet popped up.
Okay.
Well, this is all stuff I had to learn. But a model organism is like when you're doing a scientific experiment on like living structures, like you want to see like what this does to nerves or to, living tissue. You're not going to run all of those experiments on humans or even like mice or something like that. So a lot of times you're going to run them on a very, very simple organism. So C. elegans is a very, very common model organism, like just more scientific experiments than you can even count have been run on C. elegans. But because so many scientific experiments and so many like research papers are about C. elegans, that was kind of the joke is like, they're so popular model organisms and they're in like every research paper. The joke was like they're overhyped.
And do you mind explaining what they fuck themselves? Do they like have asexual reproduction?
I think with this one, I'm pretty sure it's like a hermaphroditic sort of
Okay.
situation, right? Where like a single one is not like a single individual is not male or female. It's more to do with like the reproductive
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Which he said in a very crude way because he was goofing on
Yeah,
Twitter.
I think that to me it felt like sometimes joke Twitter and serious discussion Twitter meet and it's a problem. And what was because when you were looking back on it, were you surprised to see that so many people reacted basically being offended on the behalf of people or as people who study worms?
I wasn't that surprised at the
So
time
is zoology
because
Twitter like that?
science Twitter is like
Science
that.
Twitter, okay.
Yes, science because this gets more into like biology,
Okay.
academic, like
Got it.
which those are lovely people. I talk to them all the time, but I
Of course,
wasn't
we don't
super
want to besmirch
surprised.
anyone on the show except for the people
No.
that I specifically besmirch.
Also, keep in mind this. What was this? 2020. This
Yeah.
would have been 2020. Everyone had been inside.
Yep.
For a very long time.
Uh-huh.
People's social skills were very rusty, I think, at this point. I think everyone was very stressed. Everyone was very high strung. And also, this was kind of on the heels of massive movements to change the way that academia like talks
Yes.
about certain like social
Yes.
justice issues. So like
Yes.
that was right on the coattails of that. So I think everyone was already in that mode. Everyone is in social justice in every single conversation mode.
Yes. Because what I observed, and I assume you observed too, is that it felt like some people, and I don't want to cast completely aspersions, people were going crazy, were using the language of things like racial and gender justice about people who study worms, which, like, I'm sure if you study worms or use worms, you will feel bad if people make fun of it, but that's not a justice issue, and I think that that's why it came off so silly.
It did come off so silly because I'm like, I can tell that your heart is maybe in the right place, but like this is not necessarily where this type of discourse
No.
belongs. And I could see that I could kind of see where some people were coming from because they were like, hey, I had a grant that got
Yeah.
rejected because I was gonna run this experiment on C. elegans, and they felt like C. elegans had been overrepresented in this data already. So like people were coming from a perspective of like, oh, I had a grant rejected for this reason. And then because the person who tweeted this was the editor-in-chief of eLife, which is a very prominent journal, academic journal. So people were thinking, oh, if this is the attitude of the editor-in-chief towards my model organism, then that like is a bad sign for the research I want to do. It wasn't that serious.
No, I think that's the thing. That really is the whole, like, we can go, and I think that there's a really interesting way to look at, like, the way that people are co-opting certain language, acting, but the whole thing is just, like, a lot of people are taking someone seriously when...
And then when you try to explain to people, even, like, people who were... marginalized scientists were trying to be like, hey guys, you're taking this too seriously. Let's back it up a notch. Then people would be like, oh yeah, well, people say it's just a joke when you make racist and misogynist jokes. And you're like, okay, but this is clearly not that.
It's about worms. He's talking about worms. I was reading along because I'm going to be showing screenshots from the Daily Beast story because it's really thorough. And it's just
Asher
like...
Albine, he did a great job on that.
Yes, I think it's such a 2020 thing where it's like, not everything is in the language of injustice. There actually is, things can be annoying without being injustices, and I think that is like, when you sent me this story and I'm like, hey, does this belong in the museum? I'm like, a key feature of Twitter is people treating regular annoyances like injustices.
And also, this was during a very strong era of Twitter having a main character of the day. Like there was definitely a main character era of Twitter where every day you'd log in to see who the main character of the day is.
Of course.
The only thing you need to know about the main character is that you never want to be the main character. Our poor friend Michael became the unwitting main character of the day.
Exactly. And of course, when the dust settles, I assume that like nothing happened. Like all Twitter fights, just the biology community was the same.
Yeah, I think that some of the researchers involved, some of the ones, not my friend who made the initial offending tweet, but some of the people who, called that a deep, symptom of misogyny or racism and all that stuff. They eventually did either deactivate their accounts or go private, and then eventually did be like, hey guys, I overreacted. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't that big a deal. It was very embarrassing for me.
Yeah.
So that was great.
I'll say this. I'll say this. I think you come out pretty unscathed. I think that you might feel. I think you might.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, you really came out fine. I think that everyone got one mulligan in 2020, and I'm glad that these people were able to use theirs. But you came out fine. I think is the good thing.
The most horrifying thing about that is that that's how my work and my sort of like everything that I've worked towards producing and making, and this is what lands on like Hank Green's desk. Like, this is how I finally like cross his dashboard, and it's the most like obnoxious cringe context possible. So I'm like, please don't,
as I told you before we started recording. As I told you before we started recording, the only time I've ever been quoted in a national newspaper is when I was quoted about how Marvel should have more sex scenes in the Wall Street Journal. So we've all been there. I want to thank Ellen Weatherford for reaching out and coming on. You can follow her below. Guys, make sure you follow the account, and please check out the subscription option I just added. I'm going to be doing a series where once a week I do the Museum of Not Twitter, where I talk about a thing that happened on the internet that was not on Twitter that I would not otherwise cover on the series. Also, I'm going to be having a Discord where people can vote on what tweet I do on Subscriber Sundays. And on top of that, interviews like this, like I did with Ellen, I'm going to be doing them for a little bit longer going forward, and I'll be putting those full interviews behind the paywall for subscribers. So if I do an interview that goes like a half hour, obviously I'm not going to put that in a regular Museum of Twitter video, but you can check it out if you subscribe. It's just $2.99. Please consider it. Talk to you next time. On October 19, 2016, Darren Rovell tweeted, "I feel bad for our country, but this is tremendous content." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. If they gave out awards for not reading the room, Darren Rovell would have a full trophy case. This is not the only tweet of his I'll cover on this series, but this is definitely the most important thing he's ever tweeted, and really the distillation of him as a person. For those who don't know, Darren Rovell is a sports business analyst who currently works for the Action Network, though at the time he tweeted this, he was working with ESPN. And he is known for having absolutely awful tweets. When she had her own show, sports personality Katie Nolan used to do a thing called Delete Your Account, where she would go through the worst tweets of the week, and the joke was that almost every single week, the winner was Darren Rovell. And yes, I did reach out to see if she wanted to be the guest on this episode, but understandably, I don't think she checks her DMs. But what did Darren Rovell mean by this specific tweet? If you look at when he tweeted it right after the third presidential debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so what he basically was saying is that the prospect of a Trump election, or just the spectacle of the 2016 election, was bad for this country. But he says it was tremendous content. And the thing is, objectively, he is not wrong. But the way he says it is so tone deaf and completely missing the seriousness of what was going on. And it's a perfect summation of, like, business guy brain to see a guy running on a platform of explicitly awful things and to be like, but the content numbers are through the roof. Like, yes, video of a train wreck is tremendous content, but you don't say that as the train is coming off the tracks. And I think this tweet would not have gotten as much traction if not for the beginning part, that I feel bad for our country. Because if he just said this is tremendous content, or the ratings are through the roof, you could be like, okay, he's just a cold calculating businessman, whatever. But he admits that he knows that it is an objectively bad thing for the country, but he can't help himself from being like, but the content numbers. And while you don't need to know anything else about Darren Rovell in order to enjoy this tweet, I feel like this really is a perfect summation of him. As I once said in a meme, the meme will always overlook the human element of whatever he's talking about to talk about a stat or a brand. And as I'm sure anyone who used Twitter who's watching knows, this format, I feel bad for X, but this is tremendous content, is very popular. A lot of times it's used the same way, like when Mitch McConnell froze up randomly during a press conference, someone said, I feel bad for our country, but this is tremendous content. Same thing in response to the recent Mark Robinson leaks, I feel bad for my country, but this is tremendous content. And seriously, that is tremendous content. I feel like I could be joking about Mark Robinson's message board posts until, like, 2029. A lot of times it's applied to less serious things, like when Kevin Clark here says, I feel bad for the New York Jets, but this is tremendous content. As a Jets fan, I didn't even bother to look up when he tweeted that. It's November 2022. I don't know what happened on that day, but as a Jets fan, I just know that something horrible happened, and I'm sure that for non-Jets fans, it was tremendous content. Sometimes it's applied to other countries, like I feel bad for Argentina, but this is tremendous content. And while I've made fun of Rovell this whole episode, I think that Ben Axelrod does have a point here. He says, if we're being honest, the I feel bad for our country, but this is tremendous content tweet was ahead of its time. We all just meme away now. And I think that that is in part true. But I think the thing that always will be a problem with the Rovell tweet is that he says that part out loud. I think the way that we process horrible news events through memes is not something that we really want to be conscious of. We want to do it as a way of releasing so much tension. And I think when you call attention to the fact that something is good for memes, or the memes are doing good numbers, that just makes us feel icky. Not that we shouldn't feel icky, but we don't want to feel icky. And I don't think any of this would be a problem if he didn't use the word but. because but implies that it's a trade-off. Not that he's even saying he wants this, but that one could trade terrible things happening to the country in exchange for tremendous content. To go back to my train crash analogy, it really is like watching a train crash and saying, a lot of people are dying and I feel bad for their families, but this is a tremendous spectacle. And I want to make it crystal clear that I don't actually think what Darren Rovell said is that bad. It's just that, and I apologize for using the same word over and over again, but it is so tone-deaf. Like, it is what the word tone-deaf means. There is simply a time and place to think about content, like, say you're sitting in your bedroom making a video about a tweet. And I feel like the unseriousness and inappropriateness of what Rovell said is summed up great by this Summer Brennan tweet where she adapts it into the T.S. Eliot poem The Hollow Men. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with tremendous content. And I think that's a thing we really need to reckon with, because the thing is, no matter what happens in this upcoming election, no matter what happens with America, no matter what happens with the world in the next 20, 30 years, I'm sure a lot of it will be tremendous content. And just because something is tremendous content does not mean it's not awful. And I think it's really important that we not get lulled into being entertained by the tremendous content at the detriment of actually making the world a better place. And we especially should not trust people who seem like they care more about the tremendous content than the actual fate of the world. I'm definitely not saying that Darren Rovell is that guy, but I'm a little suspicious. Please follow for a new tweet every day, and make sure you subscribe. I just added subscriptions. As I said in my previous videos, if you subscribe, you'll get one video a week called The Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover something on the internet that's not Twitter. This week, I'll be doing Glup Shido, the Star Wars meme, and so you'll also be getting the opportunity to vote on what I'm going to cover on Subscriber Sundays. A lot of cool stuff. It's just $2.99. Please consider hitting that button on my page. On August 29, 2014, Kevin Durant tweeted, "Hold up. Do women really take out the bottom two ribs so that they can have a skinny waist? Please tell me this is bullshit." Kaylana Reese responded, "It's for real." And Kevin Durant replied, "I'm gonna go outside and light myself on fire. What are we doing to our beautiful queens?" This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Saturday, and Kevin Durant is making his second and definitely not last appearance on this show. And unlike last time where he was being creepy towards a woman, here he is being very supportive of women. Some might say too supportive with the whole self-immolation thing. What happened here is that Kevin Durant became aware of a procedure called the costectomy, which is the removal of one or more ribs. Sometimes it's done for health reasons, but it can be done for cosmetic reasons, specifically to give the person a more skinny waist. And Kevin Durant, understandably, I think like most sane people, is like, wow, that's barbaric. Taking out ribs just to get a skinnier waist? And he phrased his disgust in a beautiful way. I'm gonna go light myself on fire. What are we doing to our beautiful queens? Because seriously, what the hell? It genuinely makes me really, really sad, as I can tell it does Kevin Durant, to think about the fact that beauty standards are such, where people are willing to remove ribs just to achieve a certain look. That's really, really sad. And I don't want to say that in a judgmental way. I'm sure that the people who do it feel like they have to do it. I looked up before and after photos for this surgery, which I'm not going to show because they look a little bit explicit, but it just looks unnatural. And if you were to see it in person, you wouldn't be like, oh, that person must have lost a lot of weight. You'd be like, that person looks like they're missing ribs. This is an extreme example, but this woman, Pixie, who calls herself a living cartoon character, got 6 ribs removed, and she looks like she got 6 ribs removed. If I saw her, I'd be wondering, what the hell happened to the rest of your body? And I say this out of genuine sympathy and concern. I do not want to mock people who take steps like this in order to achieve a certain look. Because clearly women who make this decision feel inadequate in their bodies, and a lot of that obviously has to do with beauty standards in our society. And clearly something is wrong if beauty standards are such where people feel like the only way that they can achieve the look that they want, the look that they see other people having, is to get literal cosmetic surgery that involves removing bones. Whatever the beauty standards of our society are going to be, and I don't expect them to be everyone is beautiful, even though I do believe that on a deep level. If there are going to be beauty standards, they should at least be things that are achievable just by doing normal things, and not to come off as the most basic ass white knight male feminist or whatever. But it really is horrifying the things that women have to do in order to meet society's beauty standards, and I think everyone should have the same reaction as Kevin Durant. Maybe not in as extreme words, but the same reaction. What this tweet really reminds me of is in the TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which was a CW musical comedy show that ran in the 2010s. In the first episode, there was a song called the Sexy Getting Ready song, in which the main character, Rebecca, is talking about all the things she's doing in order to get ready for a date. And she's kind of talking about it like it's sexy and cool, but you see her doing a bunch of horrifying stuff. And at the end, the late Nipsey Hussle features in the song and sees all the stuff she does, and he has this reaction.
God, what? This is how you get ready? This is horrifying, like a scary movie or something, like some nasty-ass patriarchal bullshit. You know what? I gotta go apologize to some bitches. I'm forever changed after what I just seen.
And while the Kevin Durant tweet was not really unearthed and made popular until a few years after that song was made, it feels almost like it's cut from the same cloth. The actual reason I wanted to do this tweet this weekend is because I saw a Letterboxd user, Brandanowitz, just put this tweet as his review for the movie The Substance. Because that movie, a horror, thriller, comedy, sci-fi, crazy movie, is about the crazy lengths that a woman will go in order to look young and beautiful. Only watch it if you're a complete sicko. And if you're asking yourself, am I a complete sicko? You're not, and don't go see it. But if you are a complete sicko, go see it. And like any poetic line that's ever been tweeted, what are we doing to our beautiful queens has become a meme. Sometimes it's actually applied to photos of plastic surgery like this before and after, and sometimes it's applied to other types of weird plastic surgery like this surgery, which I guess shrinks women's traps. I didn't know that that was a thing that people cared about, but for some reason people are getting it. Sometimes it's applied to things that are not cosmetic surgery but are also really detrimental to women, like when Hunter Schafer said she's gonna become a DJ. And oftentimes it's applied to things that are not even human at all, like how the movie Hitman was released on streaming, or how this KitchenAid mixer looks terrible. While there was serious intent behind the original tweet, what are we doing to our beautiful queens can really be applied to anything that is having a tragic thing done to it, no matter how serious or unserious. And so yeah, the only reason you should ever get a rib removed is if your doctor thinks you need to for your health. Oh, and if you're Marilyn Manson and you want to follow me for a new tweet every day, and make sure you subscribe to get the weekly edition of the Museum of Not Twitter. This week, I'm covering the legendary Star Wars character Glow Up, so please subscribe. It's just $2.99, and you'll also be able to vote on what I will cover next Sunday on Subscriber Sunday, so at least consider doing it. It's on my page. On August 6, 2013, Jeudy tweeted, Big Bird. What if you see Big Bird fucking Elmo? What if you see Big Bird robbing a old lady? What if Big Bird did a drive-by? What if you see Big Bird and Barney slapboxing? What if you see Big Bird walk up to you and ask where Sesame Street at? What if you see Big Bird juking in the club to Heartbroken? What if you see Big Bird walk to you and ask for $5 so he can buy a bag? What if you see Big Bird getting beat up by Cookie Monster for smashing Elmo? This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Last week when I didn't do a sports tweet Saturday, I said I would make it up to all the sports fans, so this is Sports Tweet Sunday. And also, I'm moving this weekend and have to record 3 episodes, and so I wanted one of them to just be silly and carried by the silliness of the tweet. Jeudy is a wide receiver who's now on the Cleveland Browns, although he was drafted by the Denver Broncos. He tweeted these tweets when he was 14 years old. And I believe it was this tweet from the great football writer Roger Sherman who first told the world about all of these Big Bird tweets. Side note, Roger is on the short list of people that I just need to reach out to because I think he'd be a great guest on the show. And Roger tweeted this shortly after Jeudy was drafted, and this is one of the more positive examples of people finding tweets after an athlete was drafted from when they were in high school. Lots of examples of this will eventually be covered in Sports Tweet Saturday. Yes, I am talking about Dante DiVincenzo. Usually it's not funny stuff though. It's usually like sexual in nature, it's usually racist. A lot of times it's white people tweeting lyrics that they shouldn't tweet. But this, in the grand scheme of things, even though he is describing Big Bird doing unsavory actions, is one of the more wholesome things that has ever been discovered from an athlete's teenage years on Twitter. So let's go through what Jeudy had to say about Big Bird that fateful night when he was 14. Now, I do think it's funny that he tweeted these almost all on the same night. One of them, though, was tweeted the next morning, the one about Big Bird doing a drive-by. So we had a bunch of thoughts about Big Bird, got them out of his system, woke up, and was like, I gotta fire off one more tweet about Big Bird. So let's go one by one, relatively quickly, because once again, you see all the stuff behind me? This stuff should mostly be moved, so I gotta get through this. Big Bird. Perfect way to start. Just saying Big Bird. What if you see Big Bird fucking Elmo? Now, imagining cartoon or puppet characters having sex is not anything new for the internet, but I do think that he is asking a good question, which is not if they had sex, but what would you do if you saw it? And I think you'd be like, what the hell? This doesn't make any sense. I don't feel comfortable here. What if you see Big Bird robbing an old lady? I'd be pretty shocked. Big Bird's massive, and old ladies tend to be small, and I think that I would be kind of scandalized by that. What if Big Bird did a drive-by? That's a really interesting question. You know, I don't know if he can fit really in a normal car, so he's probably in some type of SUV, maybe he's in a Jeep without a top. What if you see Big Bird and Barney slapboxing? I think this is interesting, because this is crossing franchises, because obviously Barney is not in the same universe as Big Bird. But if you saw them slapboxing, that's interesting, because Barney's obviously, like, really big, but I don't think of Barney as having particularly good arms. I mean, he's a dinosaur, so he has small arms. And Big Bird has a massive reach, and anyone who's watched any boxing knows that reach is huge. What if you see Big Bird walk up to you and he asks where Sesame Street at? This is actually the most normal thing that he could do. I mean, I'd be a little surprised he doesn't know how to get to Sesame Street, because he lives on Sesame Street, but this is pretty, you know, anodyne compared to the rest of the things that he's tweeting about. What if you see Big Bird juking in the club to Heartbroken? Now, this is a reference to juking, which is, I guess, a dance in Memphis. I have to admit, I was not familiar with it before I Googled it. If I saw Big Bird doing a Memphis-specific dance in the club, I would be pretty surprised, I'll be honest. What if you see Big Bird walk to you and ask for $5 to buy a bag? I would be kind of sad that he's falling on hard times that way and that he is, dealing with addiction. I don't think I'd give him the $5 because I really don't want to be a part of that, but that would be sad. What if you see Big Bird getting beat up by Cookie Monster for smashing Elmo? This is very interesting because that implies that there's some type of love triangle going on, and I would be really interested to see how that fight went down, and it would be scandalizing again. Now, what is the cultural impact of these tweets? The answer is, not really much. I'm kind of stretching the definition of the word important by covering this, but I do think it is somewhat important to talk about the silly tweets that a 14-year-old can have that suddenly become really popular because that 14-year-old grew up into a man that was drafted by the National Football League. People who are in the know do still occasionally tweet jokes about Big Bird whenever Jeudy does something. I mean, Roger here even made a joke about it when Jeudy made a great catch on Thursday Night Football. But as far as I can tell, no one has asked Jeudy about these tweets in any serious way, and that's a little disappointing. I mean, Jason Kirk said it right after they were originally unearthed, that someone should ask him about it, and no one did, and I feel like that's kind of emblematic of the no fun, no silliness attitude that a lot of NFL reporters, particularly beat reporters, have. I'll get into it more when I talk about the actual controversial tweets from athletes' teen years that have been unearthed on draft night, but I think mostly we should take them all as a fun thing to talk about. I don't think anyone should take any of this that seriously, because let's be honest, if all of our stray thoughts when we were 14 were suddenly sent out to the world and people were analyzing them on Twitter, we would all look pretty stupid. And frankly, I think that this list of thoughts is more interesting than most of the thoughts that 14-year-olds have on any given day. Thank you for watching, and I want to make sure you know that my first subscription-only episode is up, The Museum of Not Twitter, where I talk about a fake Star Wars character that is often referenced to talk about people who are into Star Wars characters that are too obscure. You know which one I'm talking about. You can just subscribe on my page, and you'll see it, and you'll get a new episode every single week of that series. On June 23rd, 2021, Maddie Lubchansky tweeted, "Say what you will about Eric Adams. No, really. Say whatever you want, it will probably be true. He acts like someone that's been struck by lightning dozens of times." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. With New York City Mayor Eric Adams getting indicted on Thursday for charges of bribery, fraud, and a whole host of other things, I felt it was appropriate to talk about what is undoubtedly the definitive tweet about Mayor Adams. And it's not just me saying that. The man has said more bizarre things and had more bizarre stories about him than basically any other politician I can remember. And so you might be thinking, Jake, you're going to use this tweet as a thinly veiled attempt to just go through a bunch of crazy stories about Eric Adams. And I want to correct you on that. It's not thinly veiled at all. That is exactly what I'm going to do. But I think this tweet is vitally important because it really put all of it in context. Many times when a story about him comes out, people will refer back to this tweet. Like here, where Eric Adams apparently was telling a story about rats that were nearly drowned in a lab, saved, and then drowned again. And he said, quote, "They learned to hope," which he said was what he has taught the city. Yes, he is comparing the city to rats that were drowned, saved, and then drowned again. And there are so many crazy video clips of him that have been quote tweeted with this original tweet from Maddie. Like this one from when he was a state senator in 2011, and he made a video basically explaining where parents should search in their kids' rooms to find contraband, like weapons and other things.
What I would like to show here is to empower parents on how to search a room inside their home. You write the Constitution. There are no First Amendment rights inside your household.
Two things I want to add. One, I did not add that music, and two, it's actually the Fourth Amendment that prevents you from illegally searching and seizing. Or this interview where he was asked the biggest softball of all time to sum up New York in 2023 in one word, and this is what he said.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open.
Yes, his answer to what was New York like in 2023 was basically 9/11 can happen any day. And the best Eric Adams video is obviously this montage of him talking about other world cities. Just watch.
Everyone knows that New York City is the Athens of America. It's the Istanbul of America. It's the Kyiv of America. It's the Seoul of America. We are the Tel Aviv of America. New York City is the Islamabad of America. The Zagreb of America. We are the Lima of America. New York City is Mexico City of America. This is the Dublin of America, New York City.
He's just a cartoon character. The getting struck by lightning dozens of times feels perfectly appropriate. And we haven't even talked about what he actually got indicted for, which is basically getting bribes and favors from the Turkish government in order to do things like approve a fire inspection of a Turkish consulate that doesn't have up-to-date fire alarms. And so much of the indictment was like cartoon mayor crimes, like he was getting free rides on Turkish Airways. And so there was a whole saga where he was going to Paris. He was going from New York to Paris. And people were puzzled as to why he flew from New York to Istanbul to Paris. And it was because he got a free flight that way, because he had free flights on Turkish Airways. And that's why I think that Maddie's tweet is so important and apt, that every scandal about Eric Adams does not feel like a regular politician scandal. I mean, there are some contours that are similar to regular politician scandals, but they're always something that is slightly out of left field, something that you would never expect a politician to say or do. And so their point that say whatever you want and it will probably be true is basically saying that nothing you can make up about him is crazier than the truth about him. And that reminds me of a term that Bill Simmons came up with called the Tyson Zone, where a celebrity is in such a crazy place that you would believe any headline that came out about them. And honestly, I don't know if there's a single thing that could be printed about Eric Adams right now that I would not believe. Like, the fact that Sabrina Carpenter unknowingly played a part in Eric Adams' indictment, sure, I'll believe it. It's no less believable than the fact that when he was running for mayor, he listed his residence as in Brooklyn, but only went there like 2 times in a week, and was very clearly living in New Jersey. And the thing that makes him kind of unique in my mind is that the things that are crazy about him are simultaneously events that he is involved in and actual things that come out of his mouth. Like, it is crazy that he is involved in weird Turkish election campaign fraud. But it's also so stupid that he says things like, when his finger was in a splint, that he got a finger injury from shaking the hand of a police officer. And one thing that's always been maddening about Eric Adams is that while he says and does all of these crazy things that are so obviously crazy to anyone, the political press insisted that he was some type of future of the Democratic Party. If you're at all involved in politics Twitter, you've no doubt seen this famous tweet from Nate Silver, where he said that he thought that Eric Adams had a good chance of being the next Democratic presidential nominee after Joe Biden. This Brendel post from Blue Sky really sums this phenomenon up, and it's pretty similar. It's like a corollary to the Maddie tweet. Eric Adams is amazing because when he won, every media person was leaping over each other to go, this is the normal, sane leadership that the political left doesn't understand. Normal, sane Americans crave. And then, every day since that, Eric Adams has been like, leprechauns are real and I'm going to cook one. In case you're wondering, when Eric Adams did get indicted, the Maddie tweet got shared over and over, and people asked them how they felt, and they said, never in doubt, baby, greatest city in the world. And I've been saving my favorite Eric Adams anecdote for last. He was once asked, what's the best concert you've ever been to? And this is how he responded. Curtis Mayfield at the Wingate Concert Series. At the concert, there was a rainstorm and the lights fell on Curtis Mayfield, and they actually paralyzed him at that concert. He died a few years ago, but it was an amazing concert before that happened. Just so unfortunate. But the thing people pointed out, and I checked this myself, you look in the LA Times, and this is what it says. Curtis Mayfield was hit by the piece of scaffolding or lighting or whatever before he started performing. Why would he make that up? And even if it was true, even if he did get paralyzed halfway through the set, why would you ever say that your favorite concert you've ever been to was one in which the performer was paralyzed? Truly, say whatever you want about that man. I'm sure it will be true. I'm sure that he will go into federal court and plead not guilty by reason of swagger. I've lived in New York on and off for about a decade now, and all I want is a normal person to be mayor, please. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing so you can get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter video where this week I covered Glup Shitto, and you also will be able to vote to see what tweets I cover on Subscriber Sundays. I'm doing this quickly. Apologies if I misspoke. I'm going to see Megalopolis in 2 seconds. Bye-bye. On July 3rd, 2015, Nega Versace tweeted, is Popstar a feminist? Is MasterCard a queer ally? Is this TV show my friend? This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. First of all, I want to apologize for the mess behind me and the general echo. I just moved, so this will all be fixed in the next couple days. But if the next few episodes are echoey, that's just the cost of doing an episode every day. But let's talk about this tweet, which was way before its time. Seriously, the fact that this was tweeted in 2015, when today it feels like every single day there's a discourse about whether a pop star has the correct political opinions, whether corporations are doing a moral good, whether a TV show is a good influence on the world. Basically, Nega Versace made a tweet about the parasocial relationship everyone has with celebrities, with brands, with pieces of media, and the situation has only gotten worse in the 9 years since. Like seriously, we're on week, 8 or 9 of discourse about whether pop stars should or shouldn't endorse a particular political candidate? Because I don't even think this tweet is saying that a pop star shouldn't be a feminist. I think what it's trying to say is really caring about that sort of thing is as ridiculous as caring about whether or not MasterCard is a queer ally or if a TV show is your friend. The tone of the tweet to me is basically, do you even hear yourself? And I do want to say that I mostly agree with this tweet, but I do think that sometimes people take it a little too seriously. I think in the context of Twitter, it is correct because people do really go overboard with the impact that they think a pop star having a particular political stance, making an endorsement, even endorsing feminism explicitly will have. I think that it can make a difference, but I think that people obsess over it like it is a silver bullet, like it's the main thing that will affect change in the world. And I think the reason for this is, and I don't know if Megan Versace was even thinking about this when she tweeted it, but I think the reason for this is that there are a lot of people who really only engage in the world through entertainment, through brands, through media. And so if the only thing you're really ever engaging in the world through is pop stars, you can delude yourself into thinking that the most important political or social action that a pop star can take is endorsing a candidate or saying nice things about feminism. So yeah, this tweet is mocking that type of person. It's also mocking the type of person who honestly falls for it when a corporation endorses a thing like a pride event that they probably really don't care about but just want the good PR. The term is pinkwashing. And in case you're wondering by this cynical definition, yes, MasterCard is a queer ally. And as for the "is this TV show my friend" bit, I think it's responding to people's impulse to want TV shows and characters in TV shows and movies to only reflect morally good things or things that they think are morally good. It's making fun of the type of people who get really mad when a character in a TV show acts problematic, as if TV shows are only supposed to be examples of perfect behavior. And this honestly might be the most prescient part of the tweet, because I feel like there were a lot of discussions about pop stars and feminism in 2015. There definitely were discussions about corporations and pride events in 2015, but the discussions about people's relationship to TV and the parasocial relationship they can have to TV and the behavior that it shows really feels like a much newer conversation. And frankly, it feels like the type of people who I see engaging in this conversation were only like 10 when this was tweeted. Like seriously, if I ever have to read another post about how you shouldn't like this character, he kills people, or you shouldn't like this character, he did this one bad thing this one time, I'm gonna have to stop going on the internet. Like, I don't watch The Interview with a Vampire TV show, but apparently there was discourse about the Lestat in it. And having seen the film and knowing that it's about vampires that live for hundreds of years, of course they do bad things. And not to be old man yells at cloud, and I don't like to make generalizations about generations, but I seriously do worry about the brains of people who think that they have to agree with everything characters on screen do in order to enjoy a piece of media. This tweet was referenced around discourse around the movie Barbie, whether Barbie was feminist and whether that mattered. It comes up a lot when people bring up the sordid histories of celebrities. A lot of people will say, like, wait, does it even matter if this person's a good person? Like this tweet that says, is the Golden Bachelor a good person? Is this TV show my friend? Is Walmart an ally? Like I said, it's really become a commentary on parasocial relationships, like this one where someone was responding to a tweet saying, Tim Walz is the dad an entire generation wish they had instead of the one they lost to Fox News. And Freelance Iconoclast responds, is Tim Walz my dad? Is MasterCard a queer ally? And I think that this exchange actually sums up my feelings about this tweet and the way it is used specifically perfectly. Because I know that Freelance Iconoclast is objectively correct. Coke Tweet should not be comparing Tim Walz, who is a politician, not someone that she knows, to her dad and to the dads of people in her generation. That is not really a healthy or good thing to do. But I also think that making fun of people who do that earnestly is a bit annoying, and so I really don't like Freelance Iconoclast tweet either. I think what using the original tweet from Nega Versace often does is it ignores the kind of unfortunate reality that people really do want Popstar to be a feminist, do really want MasterCard to be a queer ally, and do really want a TV show to be their friend. And this is not just a left-wing thing. You can basically see the same thing on the right with all these people who want to avoid companies that are woke. And I think this tweet from Ruby in 2020 unfortunately is true. It says, can't help but feel we're stuck in this horrible time warp, and we're just going to keep having is this TV show my friend discourse until the end of time. I think what she's recognizing is that this type of discourse won. I don't know what to do with this. I've been trying to record this episode for a while because I really want to get my thoughts clear and correct because I have very complicated thoughts about this issue. But I think that there's a lack of recognition that a lot of people who are the type of people who reference this tweet have, that there just is an innate human desire to take things sincerely. Like, yes, it is probably correct to roll your eyes and reference the is MasterCard a queer ally tweet when you see Charlie XCX tweet Kamala is Brad. But the normal human impulse for lots of people is to just take it at face value. They do actually want to just be inspired by something like that. I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. And I think the only conclusion I really can come to is that our brains were simply not made to exist in this media and celebrity environment. Because so much of this comes down to us seeing people or brands or pieces of media as our friends or as things and people that we know intimately. And obviously we don't. But the problem with their human brains is that for 99.9% of our existence, if you knew a lot about something or knew specifics about a person, what their favorite foods were, what their favorite songs were, that was a person you actually knew and your brain treated them as such. And so I don't think we know what to do with the fact that there are a lot of people that we don't actually know, but we know everything about them that we would if we did know them. If that makes sense. Apologies for the rambling in this one. I don't really have a closing thought. Apologies if I've gone a little far afield from what the original tweet is saying, but I do think that this is what this tweet is about, or at least it's what it's become about. Is MasterCard a queer ally is sort of a phrase to signal that you're talking about how bad parasocial relationships can be, whether that be with a TV show or a pop star or a brand. So I don't know, don't be like the person being mocked in this tweet, but also don't be an asshole to people that are sort of being like it. Just be patient. It's complicated. The world's complicated. What do you want from me? Follow me for a new tweet every day and check out the playlist for a previous entry, and make sure you subscribe if you want to see the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter episode. This week I talked about Glup Shitto. Next week I'm talking about a famous vine in a donut store, so please subscribe if you're interested in that. On June 24, 2021, Buglord tweeted, "Why didn't we learn this in high school? Bitch, we did, but you were drawing a picture of an eye." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. First off, I want to apologize again for the mess and the echo. Still moving in. I should have some acoustic paneling by tomorrow, so the echo should be better. I can't promise about the mess. I'm a slow unpacker. But this tweet is really important to me because, as you probably could guess by the fact that I do this show, the way I talk, the way I generally am, I was someone who paid attention in school, and I do often find myself getting told by people, "We didn't learn this in school," when I distinctly remember learning it. And it happens online all the time, particularly in the realm of American history. Probably the most common thing is people will be like, they didn't teach us in school that Republicans were the ones who freed the slaves, when they definitely do teach that. I want to make clear, I went to public school in Florida. And so, if there was anywhere that was not going to teach some type of American history, it would be there. I mean, maybe not now with DeSantis' policies, but at least in the 2010s, I was definitely taught a lot of American history that people claim is covered up in history class. Although this might be because I just had a great American history teacher. I had Mr. Weston, who was my AP US history and European history teacher. Great guy, great teacher. I think he technically follows me on here, although I don't know if he actually uses his account, but if you're watching this, Mr. Weston, you're great. Shouts out to you. And don't get me wrong, there definitely are things that high school should teach us that it doesn't. Like doing taxes, for example. But so often this wasn't taught to us in high school is applied to some of the most basic facts about history. And I think what this tweet is getting at is the fact that people want to be resentful now about the problems with their high school education, which once again, they have every right to be in certain areas. But at the same time, they only could have gotten so much out of it because they really weren't paying that much attention to begin with. And I'm not trying to be a scold for people who did pay attention in high school. We were all teenagers, I understand, but at the same time, have some humility. You know damn well you were drawing a picture of an eye. And when this was tweeted, it obviously generated a lot of responses. For one, a lot of people pointed out that they did not draw pictures of an eye, they actually drew this fancy S, although some others did actually submit photos of eyes they doodled. Lots of people did not like that they identified with the person who drew a picture of an eye, like Pulitzer Prize TV critic Emily Nussbaum. Lots of people said something like this, but I wanted to highlight her because I wanted to show that you can still be successful even in a space about words and writing, even if you were the person who drew a picture of an eye in class. Because I think the thing that's important to note about this tweet is that it's less making fun of the person who drew a picture of an eye in class, and more making fun of when that person then gets mad about something they didn't think they were taught. I think I said that before, but it's important to reiterate it. I also do think it's funny that Buglord apparently anticipated what happened, which is a lot of people were like, doodling is a sign of being gifted, or doodling is a sign of having ADHD. And he actually messaged a friend saying, someone's gonna reply about how doodling is either a gifted thing or an ADHD thing. And it just goes to show that Twitter never misses the opportunity to not understand the point of a joke. No one would think that this was making fun of either gifted or ADHD people, but of course Twitter is gonna think that. In addition to history facts that we were definitely taught in school, this tweet is often referenced when someone says that there's a skill we were not taught, that we definitely were taught. Like here where this guy, Dr. Strange Eons, basically says that we aren't taught critical thinking at all in school, and that what we do in school is basically the same thing as just asking ChatGPT for a prompt. This person, Your Pretty Sight is Going to Hell, responds, they teach critical thinking skills in school, you were just busy drawing a picture of an eye. And I know I'll get some pushback on this. I know there are going to be people who say that we don't teach critical thinking like we should. And I agree, we don't do enough of it, we don't do it well enough. But I also think that a lot of the teaching of critical thinking is not called that. It's just the regular assignments that you have to do. It's the essays you have to write. And if you don't take them seriously at all and you just look at them as regurgitating points that your teacher told you, then yeah, you'll never learn critical thinking. But if you actually try on them, you'll eventually learn how to critically think. I say this because I learned how to critically think in public school in Florida, and it's not like I have magic powers or something. The one criticism I absolutely do agree with, though, is that schools should do a better job of forcing kids, basically, to not just regurgitate points. And how do we do that? I have absolutely no idea, and I'm definitely the wrong person to ask because, like I said, this stuff kind of came naturally to me. I don't know how you force someone to do something that I didn't need to be forced to do. I'm sorry. One place that I do think that this tweet was deployed correctly is when this person, whose name is cropped out, I'm not sure who tweeted, media literacy is uncommon, it's not taught in schools or anything, and Secret Doves responds, it is taught in school, you literally get taught in school like many years of learning about it. And I think that this is correct. And I think the problem with it is that this is exactly the type of thing that kids, when they're in high school, complain about and say they don't like. I feel like the Venn diagram of people who say that we don't get taught media literacy in school, and the Venn diagram of people who say, the blue drapes are blue just because the author said so, is two circles. Because unfortunately, when they ask you to break down what the green light in The Great Gatsby means, that's teaching you media literacy. Like, what was the author's intent in this passage is the most basic media literacy question you can ask. And I get it. People didn't want to take those questions seriously. They didn't want to do that work because it's boring. It's boring to read a 100-year-old book and try to guess what the author meant by a certain symbol or whatever. But I think the truth that this tweet is butting up against is the fact that, like, learning anything valuable is not going to be super easy inherently. Like, yes, you can do things to make learning fun. I found learning history in particular very fun. But on some level, in order to develop a skill, you might have to do things that you find tedious or you don't really want to do. And so, if you're mad at school for not teaching you a skill that they really tried to, but you just didn't put any effort into, you really should just be mad at yourself for when you're 16 not wanting to put effort into something. And the good news is you're not 16 anymore, so you can put effort into it. And I want to reiterate again, if you put your criticisms of the American educational system in the comments, I'm sure I'll agree with all of them. This is not me trying to absolve the American educational system for its problems. I'm not trying to put all the blame on students. I'm just talking about a specific type of person, and if you're honest with yourself, you know exactly the type of person I'm talking about. And one last thing I'll say is, there's nothing wrong with drawing a picture of an eye. I'll be completely honest with you. There are a lot of times that I look back at my life in high school and my life as a young person generally, and I really regret that I did not draw a picture of an eye more. My life probably would have been a little more interesting if I did. Now, I wouldn't have the same brain for fun facts that I do, and maybe I wouldn't be making this series, but there are trade-offs with both approaches. The difference between me and someone who does a tweet that gets mocked with this Buglord tweet is that I don't tweet, in high school, they should have been giving us fun experiences. Because I know that I am the reason why I did not have as many fun experiences in high school as I now wish I did. And should I be taking my own advice and using the fact that now I'm an adult with a lot more freedom and perspective as a way to do fun experiences now? Absolutely, but who are you, my therapist? Follow for a new tweet every day, and make sure you subscribe for the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter video. I just did Glupshido. Back at it again at a certain donut shop is coming up next week. On August 9, 2014, Ted Cruz tweeted, "Wow, a cow made of butter. My girls would love it. In fact, the first sentence Caroline ever said was, I like butter." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Ah yes, a very important moment in Twitter's history, when Ted Cruz met a cow made of butter. It's a thing that's hard to articulate, and I know my whole job here is to articulate things, but there's something just so perfect to see Ted Cruz specifically with a cow made of butter. Like really, I think the only other politician that would become as much of a meme if he stood with a cow made of butter is Chris Christie, for obvious and unfortunate reasons, also no relation. Now, if you're wondering what the whole deal with a cow made of butter is, it turns out it is a staple at the Iowa State Fair. Apparently, the Iowa State Fair first had a cow made of butter back in 1911. And given that hunger and poverty was a much bigger problem back then, I can really imagine being a poor farmer in Iowa and seeing someone waste a bunch of butter making a cow and being like, geez, could use that for my English muffin this morning. And this is a photo of Sarah Pratt, who, according to the Iowa State Fair website, is the current butter sculptor. Frankly, she looks a lot more normal and pleasant than the person I imagine spending hours sculpting things out of butter. And frankly, she does a really good job. If the website is accurate, she was the one who sculpted the butter cow in the Ted Cruz photo. And I get why someone would want to take a photo with it. If I was at the Iowa State Fair, even before this Ted Cruz tweet, and I saw a cow made of butter, I probably would be like, that's pretty cool they made a cow made of butter, let me take a photo with it. Like, if you actually chart this on a scale of normalcy among things Ted Cruz has done, This is fairly normal. Like in comparison to him abandoning his state to go to Cancun during a deep freeze, him reading Dr. Seuss on the Senate floor, or the story about him hoarding cans of tomato soup when he was first married, a dad taking a photo of a cow made of butter to send back to his young daughters is a fairly normal thing. Also, seriously, I think a lot of people forgot about that tomato soup thing. His wife said that after their honeymoon, he went to the store and got 100 cans of tomato soup. What the hell? And obviously the big thing about this tweet that makes it famous is his assertion that his daughter Caroline liked butter so much that her first sentence was, "I like butter." And I'm sure that there are some people who think that he's lying, that he made that up just to appeal to the butter lobby, but in my opinion, that sounds like exactly the type of thing that a small child would say as their first sentence. Because how many thoughts do small children actually have beyond, I like this food, I don't like that food? But this got me wondering, what was my first sentence? Was it something as silly as I like butter? I called the only person who would know, my mother. Hey, Mom. Hey, Mom.
Hi.
So I'm just wondering, do you remember what my first words were?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm sure something like Dada.
And do you remember what my first sentence was?
Your first sentence. I'd have to think about it, but...
Can I ask, the most important question though is, how would you feel if my first sentence was, I like butter?
I think that was pretty funny. Most kids like butter.
I want to thank my mom for willing to participate in this really stupid bit. I did not tell her what I was going to ask before I called her, but I did text her and say, hey, do you mind if I call you for a stupid bit for my TikTok? And as you can probably tell from this show, my family is not the type to say no when you ask, do you mind participating in a stupid bit? But back to Ted Cruz. As you can imagine, people reference the Ted Cruz tweet when they visit the cow made of butter themselves, and they also reference it when they see other animals made of butter. Ted Cruz is not the only politician to have his photo taken with a cow made of butter. As anyone who knows anything about politics knows, Iowa is a very important state in presidential primaries because it's the first caucus state. So Nikki Haley took a photo with the cow made of butter when she was running for president, and other Republican luminaries like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chuck Grassley have taken a photo with the cow made of butter. Now, Chuck Grassley is, of course, a senator from Iowa, so that makes more sense. And yes, I will cover his two famous tweets, I promise. And the thing is, not all of the response to this tweet is mockery. Like, comedian Caleb Herron said, I identify with Caroline, TBH. And people have used the Ted Cruz photo to make a lot of jokes, like this tweet from Gravantis that says, wow, a calf made of gold. My girls would hate it. In fact, the first sentence Caroline ever said was, what did this people unto thee, that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? Which is a reference to something that Moses says in the book of Exodus when he comes down and finds that his supporters or his followers are now worshiping a golden calf. I did look this up. I am not a biblical scholar. That is not one of the many things I have a lot of ephemeral knowledge about. And in a tweet I will just let speak for itself, Torian Gray tweeted this photo with the caption, 9 months after Ted Cruz asked to inspect the butter cow, this was born. In case anyone was wondering, I did consider saving this tweet for maybe a time I could actually go to Iowa and go to the state fair and see the butter cow myself, but hopefully that is the type of thing I could do should this show keep growing and growing. I can't currently justify flying to Iowa for one episode though. And yes, I would have made the same face as Ted Cruz. Follow me for a new tweet every day to get the playlist for every previous entry, and if you want to get exclusive content, especially the Museum of Not Twitter, a weekly show where I talk about something on the internet that did not come from Twitter, please subscribe. Go to my page with the subscription button. It's a small fee. You get an episode every week, and you get to vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays, so check it out. On June 23rd, 2014, Michael J. Hudson tweeted, hell yeah, Benihana up in this bitch. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. A lot of times I'll do tweets that people request, tweets that are still in the zeitgeist, tweets that are still referenced by people of all ages, but sometimes I have to do a tweet that I know was super important when it was tweeted, even if no one under the age of 20 has ever heard of it. And I swear to you, Benihana up in this bitch hitting weird Twitter was like the Beatles hitting America. Okay, maybe not that much, but it was so important. It's hard to find exact records of this because the original tweet has been deleted as Michael J. Hudson's account was suspended, and it's hard to use the Wayback Machine to find tweets. It doesn't really work that well, but I swear from my recollection, this was like the most riffed on and retweeted tweet on Weird Twitter for a while. And Weird Twitter, if you haven't heard me explain it previously, was a collection of accounts that mostly made like weird jokes, absurdist humor. It was really hard to describe, but it was really peaked around like 2011 to 2014, 15, and this was a huge tweet on it. And it is not hard to understand why there was something just hilarious about the image of raw chicken being thrown onto an electric stove with the caption Benihana Benihana up in this bitch. For those who may not know, I'm not really sure how wide their reach is as a global company. Benihana is a chain of hibachi restaurants formed by Rocky Aoki, the father of model Devin Aoki and DJ Steve Aoki. It also is the location of possibly the best scene in the 2018 film Den of Thieves.
Got family here, bro. Don't really appreciate you popping off.
And hibachi is obviously a specific type of cooktop. It is specially made for that purpose, and so it is very, very funny and silly to use an electric stovetop, one of those that does not have coils, that just has the flat burners, like it is a hibachi grill. And I think a detail that's obvious, but I think it's worth pointing out that makes this extra funny, is that the chicken, which is still raw, as you can tell by a lot of it, is just strewn about the range as opposed to being on the burners. Like, you subconsciously imagine the tweeter just having chicken in like a bucket and dumping it onto his range. And as I mentioned, this tweet had a lot of fans, it had a lot of retweets, but its biggest retweet, and this might be actually its most lasting legacy, was from an unlikely source. Democratic Congressman at the time, Keith Ellison, he's now the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, accidentally retweeted this tweet from his congressional account. Okay, unfortunately, it was not him. We did not have a sitting congressman who was a big fan of weird Twitter. It actually was one of his staffers who did it by accident and eventually apologized and said, "For the record, I love Benihana." But this accidental retweet has followed Ellison in the Twitter world for so long that even recently, just a few weeks ago, when Richard Grenell said that Keith Ellison was on the short list for Kamala Harris's Attorney General should she win, Eric Brown quote tweeted and said, "Hell yeah, Benihana up in this bitch." And the phrase "hell yeah, Benihana up in this bitch" is still used as a joke whenever people cook something directly on a burner, like spaghetti loops or eggs or a cat. And on many occasions, people have captioned photos of themselves at Benihana with the caption, "Hell yeah, Benihana up in this bitch." And as I alluded to earlier, this tweet really has been stolen and passed off as someone else's a lot, probably because the original was deleted a pretty long time ago, but still. And I know most people don't think that's that big of a deal, and that is like the normal person position, and this is the thing that I am kind of a crazy person about. But I don't know, it just feels like gross to me to steal someone else's tweet without attribution. Like, it's a low stakes thing. Like, you're not like taking money from someone, you're not, stealing an actual piece of comedy that someone performs on stage. But what are we except what we put out into the world? And to take what someone else put out into the world and pass it off as your own just feels like you are fundamentally missing the point of what it means to create and what it means to communicate and what it means to put anything out into the world at all. Like, if I make a post or a tweet that gets a lot of likes and retweets, I feel good because I know I made it. I just don't understand why getting a lot of likes and retweets for something you know you didn't make would make you feel good. I just don't get it. And before any of you youngins say, people steal stuff so they can make money off of it because Twitter, you can get paid if you're verified, know that this has been happening from long before anyone was making any money off of Twitter. People were stealing jokes and reposting them as their own back in like 2012. And I think that the reason why so many people stole this is because it is such an inherently funny image. And I also think that people want other people to think that they were the ones who both were creative enough to think of it and committed enough to like ruin a bunch of chicken and ruin their stove. But the thing is, a lot of people who use the photo just are not funny enough to think of a caption like Benihana up in this bitch. Like, this one says, "Parents, can you cook dinner? Me." That's just a worse joke, and you're stealing the valor of having ruined your stovetop for a bit. Seriously, I really want to know the aftermath of making this tweet. Like, I don't know if Michael was living alone at the time, but if he wasn't, how did he explain it to his roommates or his parents or whoever he was living with? Did he buy the chicken with the intent to do this? Did he end up finishing the chicken in the oven so he could actually eat it? I would have loved to ask Michael some of these questions, but unfortunately it really looks like he's disappeared off of the internet. I remember his account got suspended back in like 2016-17, and I don't think he ever made another one. I remember that at the time he was really struggling with chronic pain from rheumatoid arthritis, so if he's still out there, if somehow this video makes it to him, man, I really hope you're doing well. You're really one of my favorite weird Twitter users. I remember at one point his display name was one of my favorites of all time, which was Slubadon Mimosas Bitch, which makes me laugh anytime I think about it. And yeah, I do think about it more than I probably should. So yeah, man, I really hope somewhere Michael knows that this tweet, "Hell yeah, Benihana up in its bitch," is still being discussed over a decade later. It's still really important. It's still something I think about every time I have hibachi. So shouts to you, man. And if that isn't a justification for the time I spend doing this series, I don't know what is. Follow me for new tweet every day, and make sure you check out the subscription option on my page. I'm doing a weekly series called The Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover an internet thing that did not start on Twitter. Last week I did Glup Shido. This week I will be doing Back at It Again at Krispy Kreme, and it's very exciting. I'm also doing a thing called Subscriber Sundays, where people on my Discord can vote for what I cover on Sundays, so consider joining up if you want either of those perks. On November 28, 2010, Stevie Johnson tweeted, "I praise you 24/7, and this is how you do me? You expect me to learn from this? How? I'll never forget this. Ever. Thanks, though. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Saturday, and if you thought I was going to make it more than like 100 episodes without doing the tweet where a wide receiver blamed God for dropping a pass, you don't know me. Because that's what's going on here. Stevie Johnson dropped the pass in a big moment in the game, and then he tweeted mad things about God. So let me give the full context for all the people who are not sports fans or people whose birth years begin with a 2. So Stevie Johnson was a wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. In the 2010 season, he was having his first breakout year. He was a 7th round draft pick a few years before, and this was the first season where he really was a number 1 wide receiver. He had made a name for himself for his great route running, his hands, and also his colorful personality on and off the field. And the reason I even thought of this tweet now is because I just saw a clip of elite cornerback Richard Sherman talking about the time he played Stevie Johnson.
Bro, Stevie Johnson gave me the longest day of my life.
So he had elite talent, he was in a breakout season. What could possibly go wrong? Well, one thing that could go wrong is that the Bills were kind of terrible that year. They didn't get their first win until week 10, and going into the week 12 game against the Steelers, they only had 2 wins. But they got the game to go to overtime, and they had the ball, and quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick is throwing up a bomb to Stevie Johnson, and this happened.
He's got Johnson! Oh, he dropped the ball!
I can say with absolute certainty that whatever emotion he is feeling in this moment is an emotion I would not wish on my worst enemy. The Bills would of course go on to lose this game, and Stevie Johnson was obviously blamed for it, and after the game he went to his car and he tweeted this tweet about God. And before I break it down further and talk about what the reaction to this tweet was, I wanted to get a first-hand source from a Bills fan of how Bills fans felt about Stevie Johnson, how they felt about this tweet. So I asked my good friend Hunter, who is the biggest Bills fan I know, and you can tell by the outfit he put on for this video. So Hunter, take it away.
Hello, friends. I have been asked by Jake to speak on an infamous tweet from former Buffalo Bills wide receiver Stevie Johnson, one of my all-time favorite Bills. I loved watching that dude play. Pretty boring game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Gets really interesting when it becomes a tie late in the 4th. We go to overtime, and Fitzpatrick throws a bomb to Stevie Johnson. Dime, right to his hands, right in the end zone. Would have been the game winner. I think we had like 1 or 2 wins overall in the season at that point and like 8 or 9 losses. And Stevie drops it. Hits the ground. He sits there. We all have to live with it. Of course, the Steelers go on to win that game in overtime. And then a couple hours later, Stevie went on Twitter and he blamed God for that drop. And it was hilarious. I think that there were I remember Stevie tweeting this, and it was so weirdly controversial. People were writing articles saying star wide receiver blames God, can't take responsibility. People were arguing whether or not he should even have brought God up or if this was some sort of blasphemy. It was ridiculous. Stevie is and always has been dramatic. He's a classic NFL wide receiver. He was a big personality, and he's still a big personality. And honestly, at that point in time, Buffalo had not had anything like that in forever. So it was huge. We loved him. We have a star wide receiver, Pro Bowl wide receiver, catching touchdown passes and doing some crazy shenanigans in the end zone. It was the best. It was like my first taste of having someone like that on a team I was rooting for at that point in my life. And for that, Stevie will always be special. And now looking back on it, now that we have Josh Allen and the Bills have made this run, it's hilarious. But at the time, it was quite frustrating because, I mean, I remember going to school and having to, defend Stevie Johnson to people who were like, this is ridiculous. We hate this guy. Of course, he immediately turned it around. Stevie Johnson is a big part of the Buffalo community. He does he runs a lot of charities and does basketball games there, and he's still around. He's a really cool dude. Stevie, I love you. You will always be one of my favorite Buffalo Bills. You were a huge part of my childhood, but that tweet is hilarious, and at the time, it was not so funny. It's also not the funniest Stevie Johnson sports tweet, but Jake can maybe talk about that one another time.
Thanks, Hunter. And you know Hunter's a good friend because he's setting me up for a future episode. And Hunter brought it up, but Stevie was really sincerely criticized by a lot of people. Even Rush Limbaugh weighed in against him. For Stevie's part, he did have some follow-up tweets apologizing for what he said and explaining it. He said for one of them, "I learned a lot within 24 hours, saw both sides, ups and downs. I am happy and thankful for yesterday. Without Sunday, I wouldn't have grew closer with the Lord." And honestly, I feel pretty bad for Stevie that he even had to explain himself. Like, obviously the tweet did not come off good, and he probably should have apologized in some way. But, I don't know, I just feel like anyone who acts like they've never been frustrated with God, if they're a religious person, is lying. And in 2020, TheAthletic.com did a great story following up with Johnson about this drop, and he had some great quotes in it. I really recommend you read it. But one of the things he said was, "Nobody thinks twice if I thank God for helping me kill this DB, but they do when I ask God, what's up? I praise you all the time. How can you let this happen to one of your soldiers?" And I know you don't want to hear this from a lapsed Catholic who was not really even that Catholic when he was a practicing Catholic, but that seems pretty reasonable to me. But quite possibly the most important thing to come out of this tweet is the formation of the name Bills Mafia. If you're an NFL fan, you know that that is what Bills fans call themselves. They call themselves the Bills Mafia, and they do crazy things like jump through tables that are on fire. To make a long story short, ESPN insider Adam Schefter tweeted something about the Stevie Johnson tweet, and this Bills fan on Twitter named Del Reed made fun of him for it and got his other followers to make fun of him for it, and they all ended up getting blocked by Adam Schefter. And at the end of the season, Reed encouraged the hashtag Bills Mafia, a term he came up with, to follow all the other accounts that were banned by Adam Schefter. And players picked up on it, offline fans picked up on it, and honestly, if before I did research for this, you asked me when the term Bills Mafia was invented, I would have said in like the 90s, because it is like, I don't remember a time where their fans were not called the Bills Mafia. And if you're looking for funny references to the Stevie Johnson tweet, don't worry, I got you, I have two. Someone referenced it last year when Marquez Valdez-Scantling for the Chiefs dropped a big pass at the end of the game. They said, MVS gotta blame God like Stevie Johnson. And the year before that, someone named Scenario Jenkins apparently made a bet, I guess, on the Lions when they were playing against the Ravens, and Justin Tucker broke the NFL record for longest kick with a 66-yard field goal to win the game. He tweeted, "That Justin Tucker 66-yarder on our field cost me 5 bans. I was questioning God like Stevie Johnson." So I guess the lesson here is that if you're going to blame God and be angry at God, you want to do it in the privacy of your own home when no one else is around. Either that or in the National Cathedral because you're mad that Mrs. Landingham died in a car accident. Make sure you follow for a new tweet every day. Check out my page for every previous entry, and consider subscribing. I do a new video every week called The Museum of Not Twitter, where I talk about something that did not originate on Twitter. Last week I did Glup Shido, and later today, my video covering the famous Vine Back at It Again at Krispy Kreme will drop. There's also the Discord where you can vote on the Subscriber Sunday tweet. We have a tweet picked out for this Sunday, and we'll be starting voting next week for next week's tweet. So please consider it. It's low price, and you get those two perks. On May 29, 2013, C. Joyner tweeted, "Pickup artists and garbage men should switch names." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It is the first edition of Subscriber Sunday, where my subscribers get to vote on which tweet I cover. Subscribe on my page and suggest a tweet through my Discord, and if it wins the vote, it's what I'll cover on Sunday. So this is one of those tweets that is important because it's just really good. A sort of lost art on Twitter, I feel like people don't do this so much anymore, is being able to come up with something super clever that is only one line long. And the reason why this tweet is so clever to me is because it both insults a group of people that deserve to be insulted and compliments a group of people that deserve to get complimented. And reading through the replies of the original tweet, I know that some people are confused because they're like, wait, this makes no sense. Why would you make them garbage artists and pickup men? And no, it's literally switching the entire names. It's calling pickup artists garbage men and calling garbage men pickup artists. Because let's be completely honest, anyone who does any of that pickup artist bullshit is a garbage man. Oh, you need to make a woman feel like shit about herself in order to make her like you? Go fuck yourself. I don't know how prevalent it still is, because I know it kind of peaked in like the late aughts, but there really was a time where it was normal for guys to be like, yeah, you have to neg a girl in order to get her to like you, and you have to make fun of her in front of her friends, and she'll be dropping her panties for you in no time. And there was the main pickup artist guy, Mystery, who even had his own show on VH1 where he looked like this. Look, I'm all for decarceration. I think we should be lowering the prison population, but I do think that if you show up anywhere looking like this, you should be put in jail, and then we'll figure out what you did later. And on the other hand, the people that we call garbage men are some of the most valuable people in our society. Think about how much we take for granted that we're able to create waste and simply put it outside where we live, and we know that it'll be taken care of by someone. And from a public health standpoint, I know if I dig through a WHO report, I'll probably find a specific number, but think about how many lives have been saved by the fact that we know that we can get rid of our garbage and not have to worry about it getting into the water supply or whatever. Twitter. And in terms of the word artist, have you ever seen a garbage person pick up trash, especially in the city? Like, I live in New York City, where for some reason we don't have dumpsters or anything. I mean, this has been a whole ordeal with the Adams administration thinking that they invented dumpsters, but whatever. But people just put out piles and piles of trash out in front of their apartment buildings, their homes, and all that. And if you watch the garbage people come through at night or in the morning, they get that into the truck so quickly. There genuinely is a skill and artistry to it that I don't think we appreciate enough. If I had to get 30 bags of trash into a truck, it would probably take me 10 minutes, but they do it in like 30 seconds. And the thing about New York too is you basically can put whatever you want in front of your apartment and they'll probably break it down and take it. And so yeah, I think that people who will literally take a bed frame, break it down in like 20 seconds, throw it in the back of the truck so you don't have to worry about it, I think those people are very valuable, and I think that pickup artist is a much better term for them than garbage man. And I know that art is subjective, but I definitely will never consider treating a woman poorly to make her sleep with you art. I can't do my usual what this tweet's impact was thing that I normally do, because frankly, this tweet's impact is just the words themselves. People have shared it. Some people have said that it is one of the most brilliant things ever written on the site. When someone gave a shout out to two garbage men in the Twin Bridges neighborhood of Albany on Reddit, someone used this post as a response, as a way of saying that, yeah, they are artists. If anything comes out of this episode, it's one, that C. Joyner is a great tweeter, and this will not be the only tweet of his that I feature on this series. And it's also, if you see a garbage man, thank him. And if you see a pickup artist, walk the other direction. I thought about saying something clever or maybe something violent, but frankly, they don't deserve your time. Fall for a new tweet every day, and please consider subscribing if you want to vote on the next Subscriber Sunday. And also, you will get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter. I just did Back at It Again at Krispy Kreme, and I got something exciting in store for next week. On January 9, 2015, Richard Dawkins tweeted, @Firescotch, sorry, who or what is BOFA? Google turns up Bank of America, but that doesn't seem applicable to your tweet. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. A Museum of Twitter would be wholly incomplete without at least one exhibit dedicated to BOFA. And if you're watching this wondering, what is BOFA? I have an answer for you. BOFA D's nuts. There were many, many options for me to choose from, many examples of people getting BOFA'd on Twitter, but I felt like Richard Dawkins getting BOFA'd was just too perfect, especially how credulous the first question is. But okay, you actually do want to know what BOFA is. You're out of the loop on this, so I'll explain at my best without doing the joke again. It's in a category of jokes I like to call an up dog joke. Like if you say that, oh my god, it smells like up dog in here, and someone says, what's up dog? You can say, not much, how about you? An old school version of this joke, I remember my dad telling me, is he said that we needed to bring a henway to someone's house, and I said, what's a henway? And he said, I don't know, a few pounds. Basically, you're intentionally trying to confuse someone in order to get them to set up a punchline of a joke. In this case, the punchline being BOFA D's nuts. And there are obviously lots of different versions of this. There was the Ligma thing, where people said that Ninja died of Ligma. When people ask what's Ligma, they obviously got Ligma nuts. Or you use the phrase CDs, and CDs what? CDs nuts. You understand. And the earliest known example of a D's nuts joke at all was on the Dr. Dre track featuring Warren G called D's nuts on The Chronic. It's in the skit portion at the beginning. Let's listen.
Hey, did what's your name get at you yesterday? These nuts.
But I wanted to highlight BOFA because I feel like BOFA is the most common one on Twitter, or at least the most common one in the sphere of Twitter that I'm in, the age cohort that I'm in. And I think it translates to text so well because you can capitalize all the letters and make it seem like an acronym. You really can't do that with some of the other ones. But the thing is, it's so silly and should have just been a fleeting joke, but it's something that's been on Twitter for years and years and years. People have been getting BOFA'd for literally a decade now. And so I really wanted to get to the bottom of why is it funny? Why do we do it? And I wanted to bring on someone who I consider one of the experts of the art. One of the people who I still see in the BOFA trenches day in and day out. Friend of the show, BuckyIsotope, whose tweet was featured in an earlier episode. I asked him to have a conversation with me about BOFA on Twitter, about BOFAing people, and about what makes it so special. And so what is it to you that is so attractive about the BOFA setup and punchline?
First of all, let's acknowledge up front, it's incredibly stupid. It's childish. It's ridiculous. Nobody in the year 2024 should ever fall for it. What's funny is there are people who still do, and when I use it, it's almost always bad people. MAGA people, bigots, misogynists, anybody of that kind are who I go after. I just browse replies of tweets from blue checkmark people mostly, and I find somebody sitting there who looks vulnerable, and I spring it on them, right? So it's they deserve it.
I look back at your tweets. I actually looked through tweets for the word BOFA, and I found that the first person that you actually BOFA'd was a guy, to speak of what you're talking about, his username was My Conservatism, and his display was John Galt's brother. So I think that really sums it up. Do you still get like an exhilaration when you see that someone responded to your BOFA with what is BOFA?
I don't know if exhilaration is the right word. I feel a little sense of satisfaction, again, because they deserve it. There's one time I backed off on it. There was somebody I thought deserved it. It was this little old lady. And then she responded with, I'm not familiar with that term. And then I got a bad feeling and I talked to her a little more. I sent a follow-up comment about, are you sure you want to know? And she was very nice and very polite, and I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Now, obviously, BOFA is just one of many setups. There's obviously, of course, like Ligma and, or even the setup of saying, one of my favorite examples of this, and I'll talk about this in the episode that I recorded around this, but that legendary college football coach, Nick Saban, will always ask people, did you hear about D's, So what is it about BOFA that is this your preferred setup?
Well, I started with Updog, actually, but that became very well known, I think, because of The Office. I think it was on there, so everybody knew what that was. It worked a few times, surprisingly. BOFA is simpler, and it's the beginning, and it still works. So I've gone with that for now. I may have to, update my methods here as BOFA becomes more well-known. I did find out National BOFA Day is November 10th, which I didn't know when I was looking around. So there is actually a national day that we get to celebrate. So maybe, I'll spring it then. I'll try to hit a few more people.
Is there any particular BOFA moment? Like on this episode, I'm covering when, Richard Dawkins said, what is this BOFA? All I see is Brit. But is there a BOFA moment or any other type of thing like that you remember distinctly?
Somebody tried to BOFA Donald Trump Jr., if I remember right.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't know that they succeeded, but they got a hold of his DM somehow and gave it a hell of a shot. The BOFA thing is very unclear on where it started and who started it. So, it's kind of one of those urban legend things. Anybody could take credit. I'm certainly not taking credit, by the way. I stumbled upon it and executed it all on my own.
Yeah.
But, nothing I'm particularly proud of. I think the people, again, deserved it.
It is also it's a little on the inappropriate side, but I feel like it is kind of a little bit of a dad joke. Have you ever tried to do, even if it wasn't BOFA specifically, that type of setup of making someone ask a question and then exclaiming something silly?
Oh, it is a traditional dad joke. I've done it to my kids when they were little. I would say I feel bad, but I don't really. I'm proud of them because my daughter, for example, plays on an intramural flag football team at college. She tried 10 variations of BOFA as their team name around balls and BOFA. They all got rejected by the college. But she absolutely gave it a shot, and I'm very proud of her for that. So, as far as a dad goes and dad jokes, I think my kids, I'm most proud of. So
that is so beautiful, and it's good to know that there's still good parenting going on.
Of course.
But yeah, any final thoughts you want to say about BOFA, about where it goes from here? You said that you might have to try something else. Actually, I think this is a very general question. What is it about these nuts as an idea of just finding a way to exclaim something inappropriate like that is primarily funny to us?
It's a good question because, in the abstract, I don't find it funny. I mean, if somebody walked up to me and said, "D's nuts," I would just stare at them like, what the hell? In normal life, online is a completely different world. Things that are not funny in person become funny online. I have no idea why that is. You could probably get one of your smarter experts to come on and talk about that because it's true. Things that verbally don't work in writing. Things that in normal writing don't work on social media.
I want to thank Bucky again for coming on. It's not that often that you get to DM someone that you followed since you were 16 years old. Hey man, do you want to come on my show and talk about BOFA for 5 minutes? And it's even rarer that they say yes. All right, let's get to some other examples of people getting BOFA'd. Annoying journalist Jonathan Chait got BOFA'd when he posted a photo of an injury and asked people for opinions on it. Someone pretended to be a doctor and said if he didn't treat it, it would lead to BOFA. And when Jonathan Chait asked what is BOFA, he got the response of BOFA D's commie nuts moist boy. British sports journalist Stephen Turtson was getting mad at people for mocking his name, which, what do you want from us? Your name's Turtson. And he made the really dumb point that if it was a Muslim name, it would be a hate crime. Eye roll, eye roll, eye roll. Anyway, someone said to him, you need to use BOFA to protect yourself from these trolls. And he asked this guy, what is BOFA? And he got the response of BOFA D's nuts, ha 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 ha. And in a perfect example of someone who deserves to get BOFA'd, getting BOFA'd, this guy, shoegaze socialist, was talking to Alex Berenson, a COVID-19 conspiracist, and Alex was asking about people getting injured or harmed by vaccines. And shoegaze socialist says, Mr. Berenson, please DM me. My father died while participating in a clinical trial for the BOFA vaccine, and I would like to tell his story. And Berenson, being an idiot, responds, please email me at alexberensonauthor@gmail.com. Also, which is the BOFA vaccine? And shoegaze socialist dunks on him hard. BOFA these nuts. So much of the fun with BOFA 2 is the anticipation of it, where someone will mention BOFA in a comment, and people will read it and be like, please ask what is BOFA? Please ask what is BOFA? And when there's the satisfaction of asking what is BOFA, when you just basically see, it's almost like in the NBA where someone throws up a lob, and you know a dunk's gonna come, and it's like, just dunk it down, BOFA these nuts. Of course, the history of this whole topic would be incomplete without talking about the time that in 2015, a 15-year-old ran a fake presidential campaign as D's nuts, which was, of course, inspired by the BOFA meme. I'm not going to take a lot of time on that because, frankly, I don't think it's that funny. The last funny thing about BOFA is that, of course, it is actually the acronym of Bank of America, which leads to confusion like this, where James Medlock thought he was getting pranked, when no, it was just Bank of America. And if you've been watching this and you're like, okay, Jake, but this is so silly, this is so juvenile, I 100% agree with you. But I think the thing that's kind of funny about this to me is, at least in the context of Twitter usually, and I think this is because it's a text medium, it almost feels completely divorced from the actual words. Like when I read BOFA these nuts, I'm not actually thinking about nuts in an anatomical way. That might just be me, and it might be a cis hetero thing, so I apologize if other people do not experience it that way, but it really just feels as silly as what's up, dog. And if you want to let me know your perspective, make sure you go to my Tastema page and give me all your thoughts. Please follow for a new tweet every day, and make sure you subscribe where you can see my 2 episodes so far of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I've covered Glupshido and Back At Again to Krispy Kreme, and you can also vote on the tweet I cover on Subscriber Sundays. On October 30th, 2022, Ellie Kremendall tweeted, "We don't talk enough about how stressful Halloween costumes are for the ADHD community." C. Sington quoted and responded, "OMG, you people can't do anything." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Another tweet that I'm conflicted about. Because on the one hand, it is funny and is mocking a thing that sort of does deserve to be mocked. But on the other hand, I do have ADHD, in case you couldn't tell by everything about this series, and I do find it very stressful to come up with a Halloween costume. So to just skip to my conclusion before I do the rest of the episode, the way I ultimately feel is that I don't think it's invalid to say that people with ADHD have a harder time getting Halloween costumes in order, because I can say from my experience, I put it off way too long, and then when Halloween comes, I forgot to get anything. But on the other hand, I do think it's silly to phrase the tweet as, "we don't talk enough about," because what is there to talk about? I've definitely said something like it before, but not everything needs to be a discourse. And the response of, "OMG, you people can't do anything," is funny. I'm not gonna pretend it's not. And it's riffing on the fact that Twitter is full of people saying, because of my neuroatypicality, I can't do XYZ. And I think a lot of those examples are completely valid. But I also can see, if you're an observer, and I even find myself doing this with other neuroatypicalities, being like, okay, come on, can't you just do it? Like, stop it. And that's not the correct reaction, but things that are funny are not always the correct things. And because my thoughts are complicated, and I know that my ADHD experience is not the universal one, I want to speak with someone else who relates to this tweet. So I talked to my friend Cecelia Alfonso-Stokes, who is a PhD student at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she also has 2 kids, and so I was very curious to see how this dilemma, being bad at getting Halloween costumes, affects her similarly and differently. So let's go to that conversation. How do you feel about this exchange?
I mean, on the one hand, so as a woman who was diagnosed with ADHD very late in life, I feel like I can relate to both sides of it. So I do feel like at some point I was like, yeah, can you people do anything? Because the concept of not doing the thing that needs to be done is something that also, as a parent, that is not really the case. But now being on the other side, it does kind of put into perspective the fact that everything feels like not just one job, but like 5 zillion little jobs. And so like every step of the process to get any task done does feel insurmountable. So yeah, I find myself, I guess, ambivalent.
The reason why I feel like this tweet is somewhat true, the original one before the response, is, I don't know about you, but I do completely... I am paralyzed by getting a Halloween costume. Like, it is actually a thing that, like, it more than, I'm paralyzed by a lot of different things with ADHD, but a Halloween costume, basically, since my mom stopped having to be on top of me getting a Halloween costume, I have always had a last minute Halloween costume that kind of sucks.
Yes, yeah, and I guess the Halloween costume with ADHD brain, you also have to do a lot of like priority balancing and things like that, and like you put all of your tasks, I guess, kind of in a queue, and you have to go through them step by step. And with Halloween, and then also with a little bit of like time blindness, you're just like, I have time. I have this thing first, and then it's the 23rd, and you're like, I still have time. Only by then, everybody else has already done the thing. So yeah, you're a little fucked, and so you're going to Goodwill.
This year, I thought of an idea for a Halloween costume in like June, and I'm like, great, I'll get that, and I still haven't gone. So as a parent, I know your kids are probably getting to the age now where they're thinking of their own Halloween costumes, but How did that manifest when you were responsible for other people's Halloween costumes? Were you also putting it off too long?
Yes and no. There were years I was super on it. Those were the years where I was just stay-at-home momming it. Like, I did not have a job, and so I would go to my friend's house with a bottle of rosé, and we would all make all our kids, like, Halloween costumes all at once. And then other years, it was like a mad dash, scrambling to find whatever scarves you could to put together some sort of, like, Hapdash Jedi costume and call it. So it's a mixed bag. And then other years I'm just tired and I'm like, here's money, buy something. I don't have the time to think about it.
Now, do you have a particular slapdash Halloween costume either for you or your kids that is memorable in your mind?
For myself, yes. When I was pregnant, I loved doing Halloween costumes. And this one year I went as, I always forget her name, but I think her name is Esther from The Scarlet Letter. And so I was like really big pregnant, and I was the one from The Scarlet Letter. And I enjoyed that. That was easy.
I didn't have a Halloween costume, and it was the day of a Halloween party, and I was walking by like one of those discount stores, and I saw that they put the Christmas stuff up, and I'm like, okay, my last minute Halloween costume is that I'm going to get a Christmas sweater, a bunch of Christmas stuff. And then when I went to the party, every time someone said, what are you supposed to be? I like did a very sincere, like, oh my God, I thought this was a Christmas party. I'm so embarrassed. But
see, it leads to creativity when you're kind of
it does.
A
it does. Do you ever find yourself, because I do, kind of bludgeoning yourself with the oh my God, you people can't do anything whenever you find yourself having a difficulty?
Yes, I do. I do get frustrated, and I go back and forth on it to such extremes that you can tell that it's been like something I've had in all my life and didn't realize until later.
Yes.
Because anytime someone's like, oh, I really need to send that email, and they just won't do it, I find myself like irrationally angry. I'm like, you just have to do it. Why aren't you just doing it?
Because of course the thing is you're actually angry at yourself.
Yeah. But then like again, with being a parent, there are so many more times where you are backed into a corner where you're like, wow, there's only one option right now, and it's for me to do this thing right now. So it kind of like hides some of those other putting things off sort of symptoms.
For me at least, and I don't know how much you relate to this, like the paralysis you'll get over in time and you'll find out strategies to making it work. But I think that the thing I've really tried to eliminate through therapy is the shame that comes with it. Because it's like, I've never once been, if I put something off and it ends up like biting me in the ass, but then I feel bad about it, that doesn't make me do it better the next time. And so like that is why I think that this exchange is very funny. But I do also think that like the oh my God, you people can't do anything is also the voice in my head that gets mad at me when I don't like being reminded of that at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there is the whole, you can't do anything. And like the most frustrating thing that I'm experiencing, at least personally right now, because I'm getting my PhD. And so I've got like a gazillion things I have to do kind of all at the same time, is going like feeling really proud of myself. And I sit down, I'm like, okay, so 8 to 9, I'm doing this, 9 to 10 to 15, I'm doing this. And then I sit down to do the thing. I'm like, this is not what I want to do right now. I don't want to read Antonio Gramsci's notebooks from prison. I want to, I don't know, plan some event that I'm not getting planned to.
The ultimate thing is that there's no solution to having an ADHD, and it is a constant push and pull between this tweet and the response, I think, is what we're ultimately getting to. I really want to thank Cecelia for making time to talk to me about ADHD and Halloween costumes. Before I go through a handful of examples of people quoting this tweet, I do want to clarify a couple things. For one, the very next year, Ellie Cremendel did follow up this tweet by saying, "The way that this joke will haunt me for all my days on this cursed app. Happy Halloween." And not all of the reactions were negative. Like Jesse McLaren here says, "I have 1,000 ideas through the year, then end up scrambling the day before like clockwork." Basically, and you can agree whether these are fair or not, people use OMG, you people can't do anything whenever someone is saying that they can't do a basic task due to a mental illness or neuroatypicality. Like here, where there was discourse about whether or not depression justifies a roommate not doing the dishes, someone responded, "You people can't do anything." When someone made a post about how online job applications that ask you to do a video make introverts think I'm in danger, someone quote tweeted it and said, "You people can't do anything." And this one was a really silly moment where someone, the Madison Tate, who's being responded to in this quoted tweet, I don't have the whole conversation because frankly, it was a tiresome discourse, basically said that there are a lot of people online online who complain that they don't have any friends, they don't have any community, but then they also always tweet about how they love to cancel plans and just sit at home and watch Netflix. And the point she was making was that maybe you have to do some things if you want to have friends, which I think is an uncontroversial point, but what do I know? Anyway, Emily responds, "Are we just pretending agoraphobia isn't real?" And Anger says, "You people can't do anything." Now here, actually, I think that this is a misuse of the "you people can't do anything," because I think this is actually more of a pancakes waffles situation than a "you people can't do anything" situation. But I digress. Like I alluded to in my conversation with Cecelia, one of the lasting legacies for me of this tweet is that it does remind me of my negative self-talk when I'm struggling with ADHD, which is not this tweet's fault. I don't want to make it seem like this CC person is a bad person for tweeting this. But I did relate to this tweet from Cherry that says, in response to someone talking about the problems they have with ADHD, "I relate to this so much, but I just can't stop thinking of the 'you people can't do anything' tweet." And yeah, man, I think about that a lot too. When I see people post stuff about ADHD that even I relate to, I can't help myself from thinking you people can't do anything, and that's not a great thing. And the thing is, I don't think there's enough discourse about how difficult it is for people with ADHD to make a 7 days a week series on TikTok about tweets. It's really difficult, and we should talk about it more. Oh my god, you people can't do anything. Please follow for a new tweet every day and check out my page for every previous entry, and consider subscribing where you can get a weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I talk about a thing that did not originate on Twitter but is still a meme on the internet. On March 19, 2019, Patricia Lockwood tweeted, "Me, lightly touching Miette with the side of my foot. Miette, move out of the way please so I don't trip on you. Miette, her eyes enormous. You kick Miette? You kick her body like the football? Oh, jail for mother. Jail for mother for 1,000 years. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. First and foremost, let me address why I read Miette's line in that voice. The reason is because that's the way I've always heard it in my head, and actually Patricia Lockwood, the tweeter, said that her voice that she imagines for Miette is like a British orphan, so I was basically right. And I realized, much like how the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme never mentions the fact that Humpty Dumpty is an egg, this tweet never mentions the fact that Miette is a cat. So let me just say, before anyone gets confused, Miette is a cat. And the first thing I like to do with tweets like this is to see how true they are. But the thing is, I've never owned a cat. I have nothing against cats. It's just that in my adult life, I've never really lived in a place long enough to have a pet. And as a child, my mom is severely allergic to cats, so I didn't grow up around cats. So I needed to find someone who I know who loves cats who can maybe tell me if this is true. The first person I reached out to is my older brother, who's been on the show before. He has 2 cats with his girlfriends, Sokka and Katara, and I assumed that he would relate to this tweet, but he said that somehow Sokka and Katara are not like Miette at all, that they're always friendly whenever he moves them, so whatever. I needed another cat daddy. No, not that. I needed another person who had a cat. And so I've kind of delayed doing this episode thinking of who I could ask. And of course, I asked one of my oldest friends in the world, Skylar, who I went to middle and high school with and have known for most of my life. He has a cat named Chino, who he's had for a while. And he said, when I reached out to him about this Miette tweet, that, yeah, Chino can be like this. In fact, he sent me a video of Chino being perturbed that he got kicked out of the way to get fed. So just talk to me a little bit about what the experience is like with your cat, Chino, which I'm showing photos of above us as we talk.
Yeah. So Chino, great cat, a little on the heavier side. So obviously when he gets in your way, sometimes it's kind of hard to move him out of the way. So you kind of give him a gentle nudge with the foot, and usually doesn't like that. Usually kind of steps back, looks at you, looks at my foot, looks at me, kind of gets really a little perturbed, I guess you could say. And really I'm just doing it for I'm just trying to help him out.
Like, do you feel like his reaction is not equivalent to what you're doing?
Yeah, no, definitely. It looks like I offended him by doing that. It's just because he's in front of a door, trying to get him food. He doesn't understand I have to open the door. I don't want to hit him with the door, so I just kind of push him out of the way, and yeah, he takes it as an offense every time.
Have you ever thought in your head what Chino is thinking in his head when you're doing this?
Oh yeah, he's always plotting and scheming. So when I do that, he's probably just really upset, thinking, what if I just lay on his face tonight and really just suffocate him?
Yeah, so you think he low-key, a little bit, part of him wants to kill you. Even though he loves you, he wants to kill you a little bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you ever sometimes wish that you could reason with him and be like, no, you don't understand, I'm getting you food?
Yeah, no, definitely. I wish I could explain in cat language, what I'm doing is to help you and help us so we can live together harmoniously. But unfortunately, he doesn't understand. He just understands food. Doesn't really understand the whole, gentle nudge. It's never a push. It's never anything mean. It's just, hey, it's like if someone's standing in front of you somewhere, hey, excuse me. But they don't understand English, unfortunately.
No. And he's acting like you kicked him like the football.
Yep.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Now, just because we know we've ragged on him a little bit, talk just before we go, a little bit, some of the good things about Chino. Why do you love Chino?
I love Chino. He loves me unconditionally. He loves my girlfriend's cat as well, Titan. So they get along like gangbusters, best friends. And yeah, he's just a great cat. He's always down to hang out and chill, and always down to snack, just like me.
I want to thank Skylar for being the cat owner representative on this episode, and I want to thank him for supplying those photos of Chino. Going back to Miette specifically, Miette is the cat owned by poet Patricia Lockwood, and she did an article in thecut.com talking about Miette after this tweet blew up. Miette was rescued from the Lawrence, Kansas SPCA in 2015, and she is one of 3 cats owned by Lockwood and her husband. I really recommend reading this whole article because Lockwood talks about Miette in such loving terms, and it made me feel so warm inside as someone who, like I said, has never owned a cat, but generally likes cats and loves pets, loves that companionship. You believe that Lockwood is a poet because this is a beautiful way to write about an animal. What's better than this? And she's so soft. She's basically a chinchilla. And she does the ragdoll thing where she just flops. She acts like she has no bones and just flops on you. Or she shows you her belly and she's like, you can touch this. I will never bite you or claw you. You can touch this belly all you want. And I'm like, okay, baby, I will. And if you're like, that's great, but I would have loved to see a photo of Miette showing off her belly, bam, there is one. I think the beauty of Lockwood's tweet is that it perfectly captures the push and pull of being a pet owner, where you know you're doing things for the good of your pet, but they can't possibly understand that because, they're not humans. And so they get really mad at you, but you're like, no, I don't want to trip over you. This is for your own good. And the fact that Lockwood is a professional poet means that she is able to come up with some of the greatest phrases that I've ever read on Twitter. I would say that this tweet, in the last 2 lines, has 2 Titanic-level phrases in the history of Twitter. Both, you kick her body like the football, which is just amazing, and especially the fact that, like I mentioned, she imagines Miette having the voice of a British orphan, so kick her body like the football is just a funny thing to imagine in that voice. And then, jail for mother for 1,000 years. And the fact that this is spoken, but 1,000 years is capitalized, is also a really funny thing. Once again, she's a poet, she's good at this sort of thing. It's why people like Monaza Hossein say things like, the words from this tweet are lodged in my brain like splinters, and I frequently find myself thinking random phrases like, you kick her like the football, and oh, jail for mother. It's why Nosy Jaren, who I'm assuming his name is Josie Naren, says, the way that this is timeless. You could tell me this was an artifact of 2012, and I believe you, for as long as it seems like this has been bouncing around in my skull. And yes, the phrases in this tweet get referenced a lot. Like when there was that article about, is my cat a prisoner, which I think I've referenced previously on the show. I do too many episodes. Someone says, you might even say, oh, jail for mother for 1,000 years. There apparently was a factoid on Tumblr saying that the average cat owner spends 3 years in prison, and the Shin cipher clarified, factoid actually just statistical error. Average owner spends 0 years in prison. Miette's mother, who kicked her body like the football and went to jail for 1,000 years, is an outlier and should not have been counted. Artist Saberbach drew a comic of Miette. Others have suggested that the Miette tweet replaced the national anthem through a comic with Sonic. I don't get the internet sometimes. They put Miette's line in Travis Kelce's mouth when he was yelling at Andy Reid. And when there was this photo of an otter getting poked from Otters an Hour, which honestly seems like a great account, I probably should follow it. Someone quoted and said, you poke Miette? You poke her body like the balloon? Oh, jail for mother. Jail for mother for 1,000 years. Look, I can't say this with absolute certainty because I don't own a cat, but it really feels like the Miette tweet is the quintessential tweet about owning a cat. Miette is at worst the 3rd most famous cat on Twitter. Like, if you say the word Miette in a tweet, everyone knows you're talking about poet Patricia Lockwood's cat Miette. There's no confusion about any other Miette you could mean. And I know I say this at the end of a lot of episodes, but I think that's just beautiful. Is it worth all the other nonsense on Twitter? For a lot of people, it isn't, but there is undoubtedly something wonderful about the fact that a poet can just put out a tweet imagining a conversation with their cat, and now that cat is synonymous with a certain feeling that we all feel about our pets. And at the very least, I think that that earns her a few 100 years off of her 1,000-year sentence in jail. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing where you get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter. And also, you can vote for what tweet I cover on Subscriber Sundays, so check it out on my page. On July 9, 2009, Kevin Smith tweeted, 10 years in and we bone like we're cheating on each other with each other. A decade plus and her /brown/taint area still pones my This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. There are a lot of people who probably thought I would never do this tweet, and frankly, those people don't know me at all, because I would not have one iota of integrity as a curator of a Museum of Twitter if this tweet was not included. My only regret is that I didn't do it for entry number 69. But this is the quintessential horny on Maine tweet. It is the text of being horny on Maine. But let me back up and give some context for the youngins. Kevin Smith is a filmmaker who, frankly, is one of the most important indie filmmakers of the 90s, and while you could could argue he never lived up to his potential, Clerks is one of the most important indie films ever made. And since 1999, Kevin has been married to Jennifer Schwalbach-Smith, who is a regular collaborator, and they have a daughter named Harley Quinn Smith. That's not a nickname. They named their daughter Harley Quinn Smith. You might also know Kevin Smith from these photos where he's wearing massive jorts. So with all that in mind, this important filmmaker who has a lot of cultural cachet decided to log on to twitter.com in its very early years in 2009 and tweet about his sex life with his wife in one of the most gross and super descriptive ways anyone's ever heard. Like, look, there are obvious reasons why I can't go beat by beat and talk very descriptively about what he says, but so many of his word choices are just revolting. I'm sorry. Specifically, it's the use of the word brown that really just... it stops me in my tracks, and I hate it so much. And the fact that he uses the slashes at all, just one of those terms would have sufficed Kevin. And then we get to the end where he says that his wife's /brown/ area still pones his For one, it is super 2009 to use the word pones here, and the fact that he spells it that way is not great either. And obviously, this whole post just makes you wonder, who was asking? I'm very happy for Kevin Smith and his wife that they still have a healthy sex life even though they've been married for a decade, but I don't need to know any of the details. And if you're wondering why did Kevin Smith tweet this, well, this is the subject of some controversy, because he claimed 5 years later that his wife dared him to tweet the most disgusting thing he could think of, and he did. And in a Facebook post detailed in this Mel magazine article by Miles Klee, Kevin Smith explained, quote-unquote, explained, that his wife was so angry about other sex tweets he had put up that she challenged herself to write the dirtiest tweet possible that she could think of, and he had to keep it up no matter what. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that this is an impossibility, but having seen early Kevin Smith movies, the thoughts that are put out in this tweet do seem like something that would come from his head. And he really was tweeting out so much filthy stuff back in the day. Am I going to show any of it to you? Absolutely not. I'm already showing you one filthy tweet. Just take my word that the man was constantly tweeting about the intimate relationship he had with his wife in very graphic ways. So needless to say, this tweet is often considered one of the worst tweets of all time. The combination of it being from a famous person and just how disgusting it is to read make it a shoo-in for any worst tweet of all time discussion. But in a weird way, it's been celebrated by Twitter because it is such a uniquely disgusting object. Even Kevin Smith celebrated its 10-year anniversary, saying that it is his Dorian Gray cocoon tweet. So long as I don't delete it, I'll never get older and I'll never die. He also reiterated that the thesis of his original tweet is still true. The thing I've noticed lately, though, is people sort of coming around to this tweet. Like here, where Trevi says, I used to think this was the worst thing anyone's ever said, but now I recognize it as a pure act of love. Or here, where Radmilk Circle Chain tweets, guys give themselves a lot of credit for being wife guys, few will tweet to millions that their wife's ass go stupid. And this one just amused me. Computer enthusiast Alex Alda tweeted, people want to act like that Kevin Smith tweet is gross, but it's just a less subtle version of the climax of Rupert Holmes' Escape, the Pina Colada song. You know, the If You Like Pina Coladas song? If you actually listen to the verses of that song, what it's about is a guy who's married, who's tired of his marriage, and he sees a classified ad in the personal section saying all the things in the chorus, if you like pina coladas, etc. And he reaches out to the person and they plan their escape at a bar called O'Malley's. And when he ends up getting at the bar, it's his wife who made the personal ad, and the idea is that they both were trying to cheat, but they ended up cheating on each other with each other, sort of like a Kevin Smith tweet. Now, the Kevin Smith tweet is still referenced often whenever someone posts something extremely graphic, or in this instance when Mark Robinson's messages on that one forum were discovered and someone compared them to the Kevin Smith tweet saying Mark Robinson saying, hold my beer. Or really any sort of obnoxious wife guy tweet is compared to the Kevin Smith tweet. When Andrew Yang was running for mayor of New York and he posted a photo of him and his wife with the caption, 15 years of riding the subway together, crime shouldn't get in the way of another 15, time for the city and the state to solve this together, someone, Dancy Self-Dean, responded, this is more disgusting than the Kevin Smith pones my tweet. At the end of the day, like I said, I'm happy that Kevin and his wife seem to be happy. Now, obviously, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the person who I really want to talk to about this is Harley Quinn, their daughter. Now, I would never ever ask, because I'm not a monster. Like, if I met her, I would not say, hey, so what about that one tweet your dad did? Both because it's none of my business, and because I don't enjoy being viewed askew. Follow for a new tweet every single day, and consider subscribing so you can get the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter, where I talk about a thing that started somewhere else other than Twitter. And also you can vote on Subscriber Sundays, where you can choose what tweet I cover on Sundays. On October 7, 2015, Freakin' Sassy tweeted, reminder that witches exist and were relentlessly slaughtered for existing, and dressing up as a caricature of a witch is distasteful. With Halloween month upon us, I don't want to see any of y'all dress up as things that disrespect oppressed religions, people, cultures. Even if you're like, what? Witches don't exist. That's silly. That's part of the problem. We exist. We're not your costume. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Look, I know some of you only stick around for tweets you've already heard of, and I'm sure most of you do not remember the time that someone went on a rant talking about how dressing up as a witch is cultural appropriation, but I do, and I think it's important. Because it is a perfect example of the type of crazy discourse you would only really get on Twitter. And as a general rule, if I ever cover a stupid discourse on the show, what I do not want you to do is to continue that discourse in the comments. This discourse happened almost 10 years ago. We do not need to repeat it. And to be absolutely clear, this was not a super niche thing that only a couple people remember. In 2022, when people were doing a lot of retrospectives on Twitter when it looked like the site was going to blow up, someone asked what the dumbest moment on the site was, and multiple people, including this person, the Black Widow, said, which Halloween costumes are cultural appropriation and disrespectful to the witches who died in Salem discourse was incredible. Even witches remember it. Like Mads here says, remember years ago when that girl said people need to stop dressing up as witches because our culture isn't a costume / claimed cultural appropriation? As a witch, I'd just like to say ... That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And I think that this is such a quintessentially Twitter, specifically such a quintessentially mid-2010s Twitter thread to do. Because it really is about, like I've discussed before, using the language of oppression to talk about things that are not in that category. Taurus Hunter here actually had a great response the day of, where she said, witches exist, we're not your costume, sad face, sad face, sad face. You really want to be oppressed that bad, you've turned to practicing spells. Okay, Sabrina. And I'm going to be a little delicate here, because I do understand that there are people who find community and culture in Wicca and witch-related things. But I think the thing that a lot of people pointed out correctly at the time is that that type of thing, that neo-pagan category of thing, and I don't want to use any specific words because I don't want to make any specific claims about cultures I don't fully understand. It's completely unrelated to the type of witch costumes that people dress up as for Halloween. And in actuality, as Yuri Beast pointed out when talking about this discourse, which does come up somewhat often, this example that I'm talking about today is the most famous one, but they point out that the actual stereotypes that witch costumes have are more often than not anti-Semitic. They're much more related to anti-Semitic stereotypes than they are to stereotypes about actual witches. And when Scathing Way was also reminiscing on this thread many years later, they point out something that I had not thought about, but is obvious in hindsight, which is when Freakin' Sassy talks about the Salem witch trials, which they did later on in another thread. This is a whole discourse. This is actually the only screenshot I can find that's still up from it. They were saying that the people who were killed at the Salem witch trials are being disrespected when you dress as a witch. But of course, in the real world, the people who were killed at the Salem witch trials were not witches. They were, as Scathing Way describes in this tweet, ordinary women who looked at their neighbor funny once. So not that it's a big deal, not that I'm gonna get offended on behalf of the victims of the Salem witch trials, but in a way, Freakin' Sassy is rewriting their history to make them witches when they were just normal people. And yes, I know that in the real world, people have been persecuted for practicing things like witchcraft. I know that that is a thing that has actually happened. But if we're all being honest with ourselves, we all know that a 6-year-old wearing a pointy hat and holding a broom is unrelated to that. I make sure not to say this often, because I think oftentimes people want to minimize the actual cultural issues that come up, especially with things like costumes. And so I really want to be clear that I'm using this sparingly. But in this case, I really have to say, it's not that serious. There are absolutely things that you should not dress as for Halloween. You should not change your skin tone for Halloween. You should not imitate another country's culture for Halloween. And honestly, if you were doing a costume that was actually aping the aesthetics of actual Wiccan people, that might actually be offensive. But what that's not is wearing a pointy hat and holding a broom. Although Mel said it better than I could have the day the tweet was tweeted. Explain to me how a witch costume is cultural appropriation. That's like saying me dressing up as Mayo is appropriating white culture. And frankly, I think that Freakin' Sassy didn't do themselves any favors by the way that they phrased some of this. Things like, that's part of the problem, we exist, we're not your costume, have been in my head for 9 years because of the way that it's written. I know for a fact that they're not the only person to make this point, but there's a reason why they're the one I remember. And as far as I can tell, Freakin' Sassy left Twitter. I'm not sure if it's because of this incident, but, you know, I would understand if they did. Because like every situation on Twitter where someone has a bad take, they got way more hate than they deserved. Because although I think this take is stupid, being stupid is not the biggest sin in the world, but of course people on Twitter definitely think that it is. Now, if you're wondering if I did this thread because it's Halloween season and there was just a recent Twitter discourse about cultural appropriation that was very funny and I will cover next year, the answer is yeah, that's what made me think of it. I'd have been psycho not to. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing so you can get the weekly episode of the Museum of Not Twitter. I've covered Club Shido, back at it again at Krispy Kreme, and I'm doing an exciting YouTube thumbnail this week. Also, you can suggest what tweet I cover on Subscriber Sundays via my Discord. board. On December 6, 2022, John Heyman tweeted, "Arson Judge appears headed to the Giants." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Sports Tweet Saturday, and with the League Championship Series going on in the MLB playoffs, I thought it was appropriate to do a tweet about one of the star players still playing, Aaron Judge of the New York Yankees. Because that's right, his name is not Arson Judge, and he does not play for the Giants. And I'm going to do my best to suppress my biases for this episode, but I want to make it clear that as a Mets fan who grew up in the shadow of the Yankees beating the Mets in the Subway Series, capping off 4 championships in 5 years, I fucking hate the Yankees almost as much as I love the Mets. And yes, I am aware that as a Mets fan feeling this way about the Yankees are like Don Draper in this meme. They don't think about us at all. And also, I just want to say, I hate when people use this meme like this, because in the actual context of the show, the person that Don Draper's talking to, Michael Ginsburg, he thinks about all the time. He's actually full of shit when he says he doesn't think about him. But anyway, here's the context of this tweet. In the 2022 MLB season, Aaron Judge hit 62 home runs for the New York Yankees. This is the most home runs anyone's ever hit in the American League in a season, and it's the 7th most home runs anyone's ever hit in a season in baseball overall. And there are some people who will say that it's technically the most home runs anyone's ever hit in a season because the people who have more than him all tested positive for steroids at some point. But people who say that are dorks whose opinions matter less to me than a used tissue. And so obviously after his 2022 campaign, Aaron Judge was an extremely valuable player. And there was actually some question of whether or not he would re-sign with the Yankees. And so when longtime sports writer John Heyman tweeted that Arson Judge was going to go to the Giants, people gasped. Obviously in hindsight, the first thing you see is the typo, calling him Arson Judge, but people were like, oh my god, this is a typo, but what if this is true? It would be a truly seismic event for baseball if one of the 3 best players in the league, no matter who you ask, changed teams, changed leagues. It would be crazy. And frankly, if this report ended up being true, I think the typo would be kind of a weird piece of ephemera. Like, wasn't it pretty funny that the first tweet that announced that Aaron Judge was going to the Giants called him Arson Judge? But what made this such a meme, and it really became a meme on baseball Twitter, is that the tweet was wrong. If you've paid even 2% attention to baseball over the past 2 years, you know that Aaron Judge is still on the New York Yankees. And shortly after tweeting this tweet, he deleted it, both because he called him arson, and because, as he followed up saying, "Giants say they have not heard from Aaron Judge. My apologies for jumping the gun." And the thing is, reporters make mistakes not infrequently. There was the whole saga of Cruz Broussard saying that Mark Cuban was driving around Dallas because he was so freaked out about DeAndre Jordan not coming to the Mavericks, which is a saga I will cover on another Sports Tweet Saturday. But the tension was so high in this moment about Aaron Judge, people were really wondering where he was going to go. And so the fact that the thing that filled the void was a wrong tweet really sent baseball Twitter into a frenzy. And when it was revealed to be wrong, that frenzy was released in the form of jokes and memes. BaseballReference.com made a fake page for Arson Judge. Pete Blackburn said that Smokey the Bear is the only Arson Judge he recognizes. And No Chen quote tweeted John Heyman's apology saying, "The Giants say they have not heard on Aaron Judge. My apologies, this is a drive at a deep left by Castellanos, and so that'll make it a 4-0 ball game." Which is a sort of if you know reference. And Aaron Judge has even commented on it when he was a guest on Base with Mookie Betts.
There was a tweet.
Yeah, I think my name changed a little bit.
Arson?
Arson Judge. I haven't seen his stats yet with the Giants.
Me neither. It's got to be pretty good, though.
Judge went on to say that he was actually on a flight when this all went down and had nothing to do with it. And a thing I want to make clear, because I think some people misunderstand how journalism works, that I don't think that John Heyman, made this up. I think he actually did hear from people that Aaron Judge was going to the Giants, but I don't think that those rumors were at the level of reportability. I mean, obviously they weren't. They were wrong. In this past season, Aaron Judge actually made his first appearance in San Francisco since this tweet, and human gas bag, Yankees announcer Michael Kay referenced it.
Well, a lot of Yankee fans and Yankee executives got nervous when they saw this John Heyman tweet. Arson Judge appears headed to the Giants, and their hearts dropped. They were not expecting that.
And when Judge hit a 3-run homer later that game, the official Yankees Twitter tweeted, "Welcome back, Arson." And if after all of this, you're like, okay, this isn't that big of a deal, it's just a typo, surely this isn't an important tweet, there's a couple things I want to emphasize and I want you to keep in mind if you're not really a baseball fan. For one, I need to re-emphasize how big of a deal it was, the possibility that Aaron Judge might not be back on the Yankees. It really was a thing that people were following with bated breath. And the second thing is you have to understand that a lot of baseball fans are humorless scolds, and a typo is about the most funny thing that they can allow themselves to laugh at. That's not to say that the Arson Judge jokes weren't funny, and that there's not a thriving baseball Twitter that does have a sense of humor. But I think the reason why this caught on so much is because things that are actually funny generally offend the sensibilities of people who are in the baseball elite. Keep in mind, we're talking about a group of people that think it's an acceptable response to throw a ball at someone 99 miles an hour just because they took a little too long to get around the bases after hitting a home run. And as for the actual baseball playoffs, Let's fucking go Mets. I cannot wait to see Edwin Diaz strike out Aaron Judge's bum ass in the World Series. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and consider subscribing so you can see the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter, where I cover a thing that became big on the internet that did not start on Twitter. The third episode is going up later today, and it's about a discussion about whether or not Fortnite is overrated. On April 2nd, 2019, Legit Tay Updates tweeted, "Update. As most of you know, I haven't been very active in the past couple of months because I was in prison. I'm back now, though. More Taylor Swift updates coming soon." Ali Ansel responded, "OMG, why?" And Legit Tay Updates replied, "I refuse to join the IDF, LMAO." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. It's Subscriber Sunday, where my subscribers get to vote on my Discord for what tweet I cover. And this tweet is iconic. I was gonna get to it eventually, but thank you, subscribers, for making me get to it now. Like, seriously, I can't think of many more iconic people in just the way you describe them on Twitter than that Taylor Swift stan account that refused to join the IDF and went to prison. And look, I'm not going to pretend that this doesn't touch on an extremely hot-button issue right now, but I'm also not going to pretend like I have any moral gray feelings about this. I think that anytime you can choose to not participate in violence against an oppressed people, that is the correct thing to do. And I don't want my use of general terms to sound like a cop-out, it's just that I do not feel qualified to speak with authority on the specific machinations of the IDF and service and things like that, and I know that no movement is done service when people like me just talk out of their ass. And frankly, since I'm just some dude, I don't know if I need to have a more nuanced take than killing innocent children in Palestine is bad and people shouldn't participate in it. And evidently, Legit Tay Updates agreed with me. I'm going to be borrowing quite a bit with interviews that this account holder who remained anonymous did with Vice and with Jacobin. She talked about how she got into Taylor Swift when she was 6, started a stan account when she got on Twitter, but also learned a lot about the Palestinian struggle through meeting Palestinians, and when she was 17, she decided that when it was her turn to serve in the IDF, which is compulsory for all Israeli citizens, she was going to not. And like other countries with compulsory military service, the penalty for not serving in the IDF is prison. But obviously, the fact that she refused to serve is not alone why she's famous. There are more people who have refused to serve in the IDF, but those other people don't run Taylor Swift stan accounts. And a funny thing I actually learned from the Vice interview, which I didn't know since Legit Tay Updates has not been on Twitter in a while, is that the stan account she ran was actually like fake updates about Taylor, like saying she was gonna buy Spain. It wasn't completely satirical because this woman actually does love Taylor Swift, but the updates were not real. So most people found out about Legit Tay Updates going to prison from this exchange that I highlighted at the beginning, but she actually was posting some updates from prison via her friend. Like after this conversation went viral, another thing that went viral was this post where she wrote out on graph paper to her friend, "Update, I'm still in prison, LMAO, but I asked a visiting friend to post this. Can y'all ... stop making comments on Taylor's body ... She'll let us know when/if she's pregnant. Calm down." And some of her other notes were actually compiled into a book called Be Gay, Do Crime, because she also is a queer creator. But it looks like this book is out of print and I couldn't find anything of where to get it. I would have honestly postponed this episode to read it if I could find an easy way to get it. Some photos of pages are online, like this photo where she talks about how someone smuggled in Larry fanfiction, as in Louis Tomlinson and Harry Styles fanfiction. But other excerpts I saw from the book talk about how it was actually hard for her. I think it's easy to joke about, and she does put LMAO at the end of a lot of her posts about it, but being an 18-year-old girl in prison, no matter what, is going to be difficult. Especially given the fact, and she talked about this in all the interviews I saw her do, there is a huge stigma against people who refuse to serve in the IDF. And obviously, Legit Tay Updates' decision has come up a lot recently with discussions about Israel and Palestine and serving in the IDF. A lot of people have said things like, if even a Taylor Swift stan account can choose not to serve in the IDF, you can choose not to serve in the IDF. And I think that gets to the crux of why this became a popular exchange. When people imagine a political dissident who stands up and is willing to go to prison for their beliefs, they do not imagine someone who stands a pop singer. But of course, political dissidents and people willing to stand up for their beliefs come in all shapes and sizes. Obviously, there is some connection to the art that you consume and enjoy and your general outlook on the world. I'm not going to pretend there isn't. But I think that there is a desire from people, particularly people on the far left, to act as though having esoteric artistic beliefs, not consuming things that are mainstream, is part of them having radical beliefs. And I don't really think those things are necessarily related. Like, they can be. You can have come by your radical beliefs by watching radical movies. But I also don't think that if someone just consumes mainstream stuff, they're unable to grasp liberatory ideas. Like, I don't think I'm breaking new ground by saying that there's a huge problem on the internet where people act as though the media they consume is important political praxis. But I'm really glad that Legit Tay Updates got the shine that she did, because I think it's important for people to know that aesthetics are not more important than actual action. Is being a Taylor Swift stan part of what you'd expect from someone who's willing to go to prison for their political beliefs? No, not at all. But I think the lesson there is that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, which is like such an obvious cliche thing, but it's obviously cliche because it's true. And I also think that legit Tay updates is important for the stan community because she will always be the one example of the good stan account. Seriously, I don't know if I can think of another good one. Follow for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing where you can get my series The Museum of Not Twitter, where I've covered Glup Shitto, Back at It Get a Krispy Kreme, Is Fortnite Actually Overrated, and also you can vote on what I cover on subscriber Sundays like these. On January 2nd, 2019, Maple tweeted, "Each day on Twitter there is one main character. The goal is to never be it." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Guys, this is entry number 100 of the Museum of Twitter. And so I thought it was only appropriate to cover a tweet that applies to half the entries already in the museum and half the entries I'm still to do. Because I am very aware that there are many main characters I've yet to cover. 30 to 50 Feral Hogs guy, Bean Dad, the list goes on. And I was kind of shocked to realize that this tweet only came out in 2019 because it feels like the term main character has been part of the Twitter lexicon forever. Like if you just offhandedly call someone the main character in a tweet, it is understood that you mean the main character of Twitter for the day. And I'll say this, through all my years on Twitter, I've never actually been the main character. I've had a couple tweets, get semi-viral and get out of my general sphere, but I've never said something stupid enough or done something weird enough to warrant being the main character. But what I understand from people who have been is that it's absolutely awful. And sometimes the awfulness is warranted, like one of the more recent main characters who just last week was the main character because he was complaining that his wife did not want to have sex 8 weeks after their son was born. But sometimes you're just a random person who says the wrong thing accidentally, or has a weird food opinion, or has a photo that looks kind of weird. To be clear, I'm being vague about examples on purpose because I don't want to spoil future episodes where I cover other main characters. As I said before, the 4 digits in the entry number is not by accident. I do plan on doing 1,000 of these. So to stick to tweets that I've already covered, for example, the Ruth Conda Forever lady who tweeted that her daughter said Ruth Conda Forever when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. That was stupid and silly, and she was the main character. And I can say with absolute certainty that she got bullied way more than she needed to. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to tell you not to dunk on someone when they say something stupid, but I also think that people on Twitter do not know how to be chill at all and do not know where lines are and continuously cross lines. It's why someone who responded to the original tweet says that even if you get 99% positive feedback from being the main character, it's still not worth it because of the 1% negative feedback. Because the thing is, being the main character on Twitter is just Twitter's version of 15 minutes of fame, which is a phenomenon that's existed since there's been mass media. But one of the ways that it's different is that back in the day, if you got like 15 minutes of fame for being able to balance 25 spoons in your mouth on the Johnny Carson show, you didn't immediately have access to every single person's thoughts about you. What's more, it was much more unlikely that you become famous or infamous from a stray thought you just said. One of the reasons I'm taking this tact of being very sympathetic towards main characters is because I can't help but think, wow, imagine if the dumbest thing I ever tweeted was the first thing anyone ever saw from me. And the existence of Twitter main characters is so fascinating because it feels like a lot of times Twitter is a bunch of different independent bubbles, but occasionally someone from one bubble will leak out or bubbles will collide and we'll all see the same person and we'll all share our opinions on them. And what's honestly hilarious is when someone who is a previous main character, who I think probably assumes that everyone forgot about it, is called out for a previous main character incident. Like here where this guy who I can't see his tweet because it was deleted, was making an argument about something and someone pointed out, hey man, weren't you once a main character for arguing that slavery wasn't bad? And it's especially funny when someone who became known as a main character just kind of keeps tweeting like a normal person, and in some ways I kind of respect it. Like the fact that I see the lady who did that really horny tweet about Beto O'Rourke and calves cramping, the fact that I see her just tweeting normally on political Twitter as if she didn't tweet that, I respect that. She didn't delete her account, she didn't go away, she's like, yeah, I tweeted that, let's move on. And yes, I definitely am going to cover that tweet. Frankly, I really want her as a guest for it. I know I probably can't land her, but I want to hear her thoughts on it. Now, as multiple people have pointed out, one of the problems with post-Elon Twitter is that Elon effectively paid $44 billion to be the main character of Twitter every day. And the thing about being a main character is, if someone likes being the main character and relishes the awfulness that comes out of it, one, they're insane, and two, it really undercuts the enjoyable parts of talking about a main character. It's so obvious it doesn't really need to be said, but it's not that fun to make fun of a troll, because a troll enjoys it. But anyway, if you've ever been a main character on Twitter, please let me know. You can DM me, you can send me an email. I'm actually incredibly easy to get in touch with. I'd love to talk to you, maybe on an episode, because I'm fascinated with what that's like psychologically. But alright, let's get to the episode 100 festivities. Thank you for helping me get to 100 episodes. I know I say thank you all the time whenever I hit any milestone, but man, this happened really quickly. Time really passes when you do something once a day. For anyone who's watched all 100, thank you. And for anyone who hasn't, that's completely understandable. It runs like 8 hours now because I'm incapable of keeping things under 5 minutes. I've covered some of my favorite tweets, but honestly, there's still a lot of tweets I love I've yet to cover. I really, really am serious about doing this past episode 1000. And so believe me, I see all of your comments requesting all these different episodes. Some of them I haven't done yet because I have plans for them, and some of them I haven't done yet because I want to make sure the episode is special, and I want to make sure I have funny thoughts before I do it. Of the first 100, my favorite episode is probably the drill candles tweet, just because the idea of getting an actual professional economics journalist on to evaluate drill's budget will never make me laugh. I'll be on my deathbed still laughing about the fact that I did that. But I also really enjoy when I've been able to talk to friends in my life. I love that I was able to get my brother on to talk about a tweet. I love that I was able to get a friend of mine from middle school on to talk about a tweet. I'm just so glad that you guys love when I do stuff like that. And so yeah, thank you for supporting the show. As I've said many times, and I really do mean it, if you or someone you know has an iconic tweet, please get in contact with me. I really want to increase the percentage of these that I talk to the tweeter about. I think that those are my favorite episodes, and I think that that's where this show is most useful. I can talk livelong day about these tweets just to myself in my room, and that's fine, but I really like when I'm able to put on a journalist hat and talk to someone about something they tweeted. Like I said earlier, I'm extremely easy to get in contact with. I love talking about this stuff. It's my favorite thing in the world to do is to talk about ephemera. I've said this many times. But more important than that, please follow if you don't already for a new tweet every single day. And if you really like the show, consider subscribing. You'll get the weekly The Museum of Not Twitter, which is me talking about a thing that did not start on Twitter. And you'll also be able to vote on what I cover on Sundays for Subscriber Sunday. But thank you again. Let's go Mets. They will have probably lost the first game of the NLCS by the time you see this, but whatever. Have a good one.